continent. It's the same approach we take with the indigenous communities in Canada. It's really working with the mandated indigenous institutions to really drive the change. And this, we feel, is incredibly impactful. We want to continue to learn sharings from this approach to our work with the world, hoping that we can catalyze even further action. In terms of the pandemic and how we continued our work, we were agile and we sought to understand how the pandemic was affecting the communities that we work with and that we seek to serve. Our mission is very, very clear: 30 million young Africans in dignified work by 2030 and 30,000 young people from indigenous communities here in Canada.
The Taliban takeover plunged Afghanistan into chaos. These students, members of the Afghan robotics team, were evacuated to Qatar.
9 of us, we are here, but millions of girls, they are in Afghanistan. They are like half of the population.
They want to give back to their homeland.
I want to be the minister of the technology and the education.
Watch our exclusive interview with the Afghan girls robotics team at the Qatar Economic Forum. Join us in Doha this June.
The top issue that Algeria is dealing with right now, I think, is inflation, and to make sure that Algeria can diversify its economy. We are, as you know, very dependent on oil and gas, and I think Algeria has basically to refocus on creating a new industry and to make sure that we can basically provide enough jobs to the mass growth of population in Algeria. As you know, Algeria has the biggest population of students in North Africa. We need to bring new technology, new know-how, and be totally independent of oil and gas and make sure that we can diversify this economy and having more than 10% of growth per annum. My job, EFCON, had to adapt regarding the current situation, not only the pandemic, but also because of the potential crisis inflation on the market. People are really scared, the geopolitical situation. It's really to reinvent ourselves. We are consolidating our team. We are making sure that we are really focusing on the main market where we have advantages compared to other technologies.
The Russia-Ukraine crisis has really affected a lot of smallholder farmers in this country, and it all goes back to the fertilizer prices. Ukraine has been a large input supplier for fertilizer manufacturing, and the fact that they have had the political instability in the country, it has meant that the actual inputs for fertilizer have increased, which has meant that we're unable to provide our fertilizer at an affordable rate for our farmers. So it has really impacted the accessibility to quality inputs. Also, the increases in gas prices and the current market where there's a lot of gas instability, access to fuel in the country has had some challenges over the last couple of months, all of which for us has meant the price of our inputs has gone up.
If you look at the biodiversity crisis, that's a major challenge ahead, just like climate change. And I think, in a way, the biodiversity loss, or we should say destruction, I suppose, that biodiversity destruction in nature has also, in a way, been mirrored in the economy. And that's why I think when we have these stresses, it's because we have such an efficient, let's say, model, delivery on the day, extremely fast economy based on pace, and we don't have biodiversity in the economy. And I think the future must have that kind of level of community, of resonance rather than acceleration, and a kind of embedded and localness, which has been stripped out because of the demands of globalization. So globalization, of course, has brought many advantages, but it's also made us less diverse as an economy, and I think as people as well. So in order to protect biodiversity on the planet, we also need much greater biodiversity in our economies.
Please take your seats. The program is about to begin. Please welcome to the stage Zain Verji, host of the Qatar Economic Forum.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the final day of the Qatar Economic Forum, powered by Bloomberg. Does the world need a shift in values to build a more equitable and sustainable future? Today's conversations are going to range from the dire threat of famine to reinventing an in-person world to the countdown to the greatest show on earth, the FIFA World Cup, to be hosted here in Doha. But first, I just want to say we would really love to hear from you. To ask one of our speakers a question, just scan the QR code. It's just on the back of your badge. And we'd love for you also to engage with us on social media using the hashtag Qatar Economic Forum. I'd like to take a moment to thank our underwriters, the Ministry of Commerce and Industry of the State of Qatar, the Qatar Investment Authority, Invest Qatar, and the Qatar Financial Center, our country host, Media City Qatar, and our presenting sponsor, Q Invest. Supply chain disruptions are threatening food security, and they are highlighting issues similar to the vaccine inequity at the height of the pandemic. How do we make sure that there is enough food for all? We ask the experts.
Please welcome to the stage Dr. Christopher Cleverly, President of Tingo, Erez Galanska, founder and CEO of Infarm, and His Excellency Dr. Mohammed Sulaiman Al-Jasser, Chairman of the Islamic Development Group, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jennifer Zabasaja.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. Chris, Erez, and Mohammed, thank you for being a part of this discussion with me. So We just heard Zain talk a little bit about sort of what is happening right now in the world right now, but I wanted to start here. When we think about the future of food security, because all of you are so involved in this discussion more broadly, should we think about it in terms of improving the existing food supply system with the supply chains that are here now, or completely uprooting it? Because each of you have a different take on sort of what the future could mean. Erez, do you want to start?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for having me. So we at Inform, we're building a global farming network, and when we think about the food supply chain, we don't think about improving it, we think about redesigning it from A to Z completely. So if you look on the numbers, the UN predict that by 2050, we will need to increase production of food by 70%, or alternatively find a new planet. We at Inform, we took that challenge, we embraced that challenge, and we want to find new ways to grow food in harsh climates, in climates that are unsuitable for agriculture, and we want to do it while using resources in more efficient way, and ultimately creating a new food system which is much more resilient, much more sustainable, and bringing extreme value to the end consumers, if you like, which is this is our mission, to bring premium produce, more nutritional produce, and to bring it in affordable prices to everyone.
Mohammed, what do you think?
Well, first I want to thank our Qatari brothers and sisters and the government for this invitation and for this wonderful get-together. This is a great opportunity to share experiences, because basically development is all about sharing good experiences that deliver goods. Food security and what do we do about it is an age-long challenge humanity has always had. I think it is important to remember that food is also related to jobs. Farms still hold a lot of the population. In our membership of the Islamic Development Bank of 57 countries, 50% of employment is in agriculture. In some countries, it's up to 75% of employment is in agriculture. So when we look at agriculture, we don't look just at food, as critically important as it is, but we want food to be produced by people on the land, so they have jobs, they have security, and then hopefully they will improve, so there will be a bit of surplus that will go to the urban dwellers, so they will also have food on the table. So to us, it's a cycle, and we have to work with the farmers and with the governments and with NGOs and other organizations to try to enhance that ecosystem. Otherwise, we could end up with a perfect storm. And it's looming now with all the drought that we have in East Africa, with all the increase in prices because of the conflict, shortages here and there. We have serious challenges, but we have to look at them holistically, and we at the Islamic Development Bank are doing a lot to do that, and I'll have a chance maybe to mention some of it later.
And when we talk about improving the lives of farmers, Chris, this is something that you and your team at Tingo are very passionate about, because as Mohammed said, it is a part of the overall ecosystem. Can you just dig into that for us?
Well, look, the farmer is, and always will be, in any story about food security, the hero of the story, right? There's no point in talking about food or food production unless you actually include the farmer at the center of that. But what we do instead is we exploit the farmer. And what we do instead is we charge him huge interest rates, and the highest interest rates fall on the poorest of us all. And yet we still expect those people to then feed us. If you transport food over a couple of weeks, you earn more than a farmer who tends and cultivates food over many months or grows trees over many years. So not only is the supply chain broken, there's other things that are broken, but we can't talk about the supply chain without talking about, you know, as His Excellency has said, without talking about the obvious, COVID and the war in Eastern Europe. Now, those things are not the problem, they're symptomatic of the problem. They're showing us where the clinch points are, you know, because The reality of it is that Ukraine is half the size of South Africa. So how can it feed the whole of Africa, yet Africa cannot feed Africa? You know, so these are the things we've got to look at, and you know, regreening the areas that Your Excellency works in. You know, the Sahel area and stuff like that. There's so much that can be done when we're working together. But this is about a whole change in ethos, from just-in-time supply to on-demand supply to onshoring, and things like vertical farming are going to be key to that.
Is it key to that, Erez? I mean, can you get into that? Because there is some concern with vertical farming, in particular in terms of energy concerns, right? I mean, we're dealing with a climate crisis in addition to a food insecurity crisis. So is vertical farming the solution, the be-all, end-all?
It's one of the solutions, of course. So with each and every farm that we deploy in the field, we are saving precious land, we save water, we can cultivate food with 95% less water, which is, of course, for regions like the Gulf area or Africa, it's something that we need to look at. So we look on how to bring sustainability and embed it in our farms, in our company. And of course, energy is one of the biggest points and one of the biggest challenges. Here, we can harvest the power of the sun. In some areas, we harvest the power of the wind or the water. And I can tell you that we are one of the first vertical farming companies in the world to commit on science-based targets, and we're going to transform the entire farming network currently to work on renewable energy by next year. And beside the infrastructure, we're also looking on how to grow plants with less resources. So we also look on the photosynthesis activities. We're collecting significant amount of data, very quality data on plants. And this year, we're already going to reach more than 100 billion data points on plants themselves, so we can grow the plants in a more efficient way and use energy just in a more efficient way. And this is a journey, and I can tell you we cracked the code on fruit and vegetables, but we're also now looking on staple production, how to grow wheat and rice. And if you really look 10 years, 20 years ahead, it's inevitable that the field is going to move into the indoor, so we can supply locally and also ensure that there is a consistent in quality and to supply the people food.
Like Qatar, you mentioned.
Qatar is definitely an interesting opportunity for us. It's a very unique place to start and think about how to make Qatar not just economic center, but also an agriculture center, if you like, for the region, and change the mentality from an importer potentially to an exporter. And in Qatar, 90% is imported from other places in the world. So there's a unique opportunity to transform and bring farms to produce local fresh produce. And I can tell you that we are working on a very big farm, a mega farm in Qatar, to be open already for next year. We are very excited about this, of course.
Mohammed, is that the type of climate-smart agriculture that you and your team are investing in? I know that's part of your medium-term approaches.
We're looking at that, but also we're cognizant of the fact that we have, in our member countries, we have 25% of the world's total population. We have 25% of the world's arable land. We have also 13% of the total renewable water resources, and yet we're starving. So the challenge is really how to mobilize these resources and get this development paradigm to work in our favor. This is very important. We have countries that have plenty of land, plenty of water, and plenty of population, but they are importing from Kansas or from Ukraine. That is, we should pause and stop and think about these things. And we at the Islamic Development Bank, we try to convey these messages, and we try to discuss it in such conferences, but also in closed door rooms. But there is the development challenges are very serious, and it's not lack of technology, it's really a lack of transparency, lack of dedication to really get those countries out of those poverty areas. And some countries have tried and have succeeded. So it's not really such a rocket science, but we really need to get on with the challenges of development and creating the ecosystem that will keep people on the farms, at least as long as they're not needed in the urban areas, and let them produce the goods that they need and the urban population needs. And then, of course, those countries that have smaller land mass and have high-tech content can go for all of those creative ideas that will supply even more food.
Yeah, I think, Your Excellency is completely correct. It's not rocket science. If the way to build out a successful ecosystem, farm ecosystem, is to just show young people that they can make a profit and they can enjoy it. And at the moment, that's impossible, right? So most people live in a subsistence situation where they can't feed their families, they can't educate themselves, and so they have to look for prospects elsewhere. So if we work out a methodology whereby some of the value, more of the value, stays with the farmer, so that he actually wants to grow for us, we'd have more food. It's a logical scenario. One follows the other. And I think that's our duty as people who are involved in this industry, to actually ensure that we work towards that and stop thinking that massive big farms produce better, more food. They don't. They don't even produce cheaper food. The best food with the highest value is smallholders who are well paid, and they're in any way against, in any stage against a subsidized large farm. They're a better economic return. And we've just got to believe that globally and stop putting the rug away from the feet of those who are trying to do it locally.
So where do the solutions start then? Because, of course, that makes sense, but there still are these large farms, right? So how do the small farm holders empower themselves?
Economic empowerment is a very important issue. And actually, we in the Islamic Development Bank have been dedicating a lot of time and effort and money to do that. And for economic empowerment, mostly it's women and the youth that either suffer the most or have the highest to gain from all of that. And we're doing a lot of that now. I mean, we have programs in Africa and Uzbekistan and other countries in collaboration with the governments and bringing to bear all the good experiences that have been done. And we have a huge program in agricultural development. We have more than $20 billion actually portfolio in our countries. But the dedicated programs for economic empowerment are growing, and we have what we call Lives and Livelihoods program, $2.5 billion that has been fully utilized, and we're going now for a new LLF2 because it has been delivering really some good results. And we encourage other multilateral development institutions to follow suit, and we'll be happy for all of those that want to participate with us in these programs. But let me also mention, because the world is waiting to see who's doing what also, instead of pointing fingers, I just came last night from Vienna, where the Arab Coordination Group and the OPEC Fund had a meeting. And we as a group, the Arab Coordination Group, which is made up of the Arab regional and multilateral institutions, have committed a minimum of $10 billion to deal with this very serious looming food shortage and hunger. And in some of the areas, some countries, it's just the rise in prices. In some countries, like in the Sahel and in East Africa, it's really a very serious drought and starvation and famine issues. And we need to mobilize these resources and use them as efficiently as possible, because that has always been the victim of a lot of the work in development economics.
From the private sector. What about from the public sector, Erez?
So one of the solutions, of course, is to diversify and build farms in different sizes and shapes, different techniques, different methods. So this is one element of this. Of course, we need to diversify the sources of energy, and we need to maybe think about what we are growing and not think about it from a supply chain perspective, but think about what we actually need to eat, so it could be also more efficient on that side. We need to reduce significant amount of waste, which we are producing a lot of food, but it's not even coming to our plate. We're talking about 1,500 to 2,000 kilometers between farm to plate, and 40–50% is wasted. So we need to look holistically, and there is many different things to improve our current supply chain. And if you look on what we do at In-Farm, we are thinking about how to redesign it and how to deploy farms that are also accessible to anyone. So anyone can grow, which ultimately will create more farmers, maybe not the romantic farmer that we have in mind, but modern farmers that use AI to grow plants. And this way we can increase efficiency by hundreds of percentages. And yeah, this is what we are working on, and I truly believe that once other parties come in from, if it's policymakers, if it's governments, and together we create an ecosystem and invest significant amount of resource, we can create a new food infrastructure worldwide to feed the people.
And a lot of this has been focused on the long term, right? But when we think about the short term, we think about the supply disruptions that are happening right now. And for many families, the next meal is really all that they're focused on. What needs to happen immediately in the next, in the short term for things to change, for people, for us to not go further down on this path?
I think we've got to look at ways of disintermediating interest rates from this system in a way in which there's fair amounts of money are paid for things. In Africa, the average farmer pays 25 to 40% a year in interest. So why does he want to grow food? Every time he grows any food, he bets the whole farm. So we've got to get to a position where there's easy access to the kinds of funds that are coordinated to the purchase of the goods as well as to the growing. It costs about a third of the amount that it costs to sell the goods, to actually grow the goods. So your inputs, your seeds, your seedlings, your pesticides, solar fertilizers, they cost about a third of what the actual amount that you're going to sell your goods at the end of the day are for. We know that. So why don't we coordinate the two things, have actually systems that actually look at what the sale is as well as what the cost of production is, and create financial systems that actually support farmers, and stop this sort of the price gouging, which destroys the actual farmer who wants to grow. If we did that within a couple of seasons, we'd be already there, because it only takes a season to grow something. The land is there, the fertilizer's there. Urea is a big commodity here in Qatar. All these things are available, but it's the way that they land and arrive with the farmer that's the problem.
Do you put that on the banks?
It's the way we look at the world. We don't look at Africa as a resource, save for for minerals and things we pull up. We don't see it as a resource for food. We see it as a victim in the food game. But actually, 60% of the world's cultivatable arable land is in Africa. So if we support the farmers that are there, don't harvest them, but help them harvest their food, then actually we've got a chance to actually feed ourselves. If Ukraine can feed so much of the world, what could Africa do? Thank you.
Erez, what do you think? I mean, in terms of short-term solutions.
First of all, I completely agree. It's all about how to incentivize the system to grow more food. And obviously, if you take there's the financial incentives. I think if governments, if there will be certain funds, will step in immediately, will understand that there is, first of all, there is a real opportunity, financial opportunity, but also there is a real need for us to come together and start to cultivate food to feed our own countries, but also to think about our neighbors, and even far more from that. Once we are stepping into that rhythm, we can start and build farm at scale. The technology is there. It's extremely scalable technology. There is many more methods, and there is also the passion of people like us to do that. So it's really about bringing people together and do it very, very fast. I can tell you that we are working with different NGOs and different policymakers and different companies, and we're going to bring everyone together to COP27, and we're going to discuss also about how to feed the growing population, but also how our plate is looking like, how about our diets, and how those diets also going to change the way we're going to feed ourselves in the future. So we're doing a lot of work on this. on the short term, it's more about us coming together.
Mohammed, I'd love to get your final word, and especially when we think about the Africa free trade in terms of, using the continent as
I will, but I would like just to add, shark lenders are all over the world, and we know that they are partly the culprits.
Yeah.
But they wouldn't be there if there were good government regulations in the financial markets. I'm a former central bank governor, and I know how that works. So it is very important that the governments also take upon themselves creating the ecosystem for these small lenders to be able to go out and multiply the amounts of money that they have, and they are lending to these small farmers. I think in the short term, we need to supplement the reserves or the stocks of food in these countries. Some of them have gone really low. And this is really where short-term financing comes into the picture. And what I mentioned about the Arab Coordination Group commitment of 10 billion, some of it will go into that. And we're already, the ITFC of the Islamic Development Bank is already working with countries to supplement their ability to rebuild their reserves. But also there are other things that we have been doing and not getting sufficient attention, and they really plug a big gap. We have been involved in Africa with the rice chain production. It is amazing how well it has been doing, and we've already lent money to 3 countries, and 2 countries are coming up. I think you have in Africa something called the cassava. I think this is a very popular food, and we've been lending, and farms are coming up, and there is a value chain that has been identified, and people are associating with it, and an ecosystem is developing. So we need to look for all of those great opportunities.
I think this is a fantastic suggestion, Your Excellency, is in regard to rice. I mean, it's a staple that's seen by most people in the world, but there is no futures contract in rice, which is extraordinary, that there is no way of people actually to peg the pricing, and no futures contracts to create liquidity in that market. But there is an amazing supply chain opportunity, and we at Tingo, we have 1.1 million rice farmers amongst the 10 million farmers that we have, who regularly pay to use our app, which connects between buyers and sellers, and we would love to be able to connect those 1.1 million rice farmers to your initiative.
I'd be very happy.
Great. I think we've formed a lot of connections here, business opportunities, but also really important for the millions of people who are potentially food insecure. Gentlemen, thank you so much. We're out of time. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She is a prominent champion of the sustainability agenda. She's a driving force for people, planet, and prosperity. Earlier, I spoke to Her Excellency, Amina Mohammed, Deputy Secretary General of the United Nations. We asked her whether the world would meet the Sustainable Development Goals by 2030. Please watch.
Thank you so much for joining us, Madam Deputy Secretary General. So great to see you.
Well, fantastic to see you and a pleasure to be with you.
Let me start by asking you about the recent economic downturns, the supply chain crisis, the rising cost of living, greater inequality around the world. It really has put the SDGs into some jeopardy, and in fact, putting them even further out of reach because of what is happening globally today. What are your thoughts?
Well, one's thoughts of great concern. The SDGs still remain a framing that is as relevant as when we gavelled it in 2015 today. But we've been hit by multiple crises, from climate to COVID and now the war in Ukraine. The goals were off track when we determined the decade for action in 2020. And so now what we're facing is, the struggle to get them back on track, And then perhaps in doing things differently, we can accelerate the scale and the urgency around some of the goals for people. It's a promise that the global community has made, and we can't drop the ball now. We have 8 years, so there are still possibilities of us making good on a number of the goals, but it will require a huge lift, and it will require one that is done with the multilateral system, but with international partnerships.
So what do you think that would look like when you do a lift like that and change course, do things differently to get things back on track? What does that look like?
Well, of recent, there have been a number of commitments to the climate agenda, for instance, the just transitions that we speak to on energy, that we speak to on food transformations of our systems, that we have another look at the global financial architecture so that the flows that we are seeing committed to are able to reach many countries at the same time. Now, this is compounded by what we have. The reality check is that we're still not vaccines with everyone. We still have to take a test. And so if you've got COVID, then you know that you can't move very much further. And that really does exacerbate many of the issues around the supply chains and economies getting back to build back better. So I would say that, for now, on the climate agenda, it's the best entry point that we have. We have a focus on a number of countries that have got to look at the emissions and reduce them to get to our 1.5-degree world, which is looking further and further out of reach. More importantly, on the adaptation, that's where we need to see flows coming in for many developing countries, which don't just address climate, but they address the issues of women. They will address the issues of jobs for young people. All of these will bring, for us, more stability in the world, more opportunity for growth and for inclusion.
Well, staying on the climate agenda, let's put that in the context of the current war in Ukraine, because that's really deepened the reliance on fossil fuels by the world's top emitters, and world temperatures are actually set to rise even further this year because of that. What do you think are some of the most immediate and important actions that can actually tangibly be taken by nations now to bring peace and stability while averting even further climate catastrophe because of what's going on in Ukraine?
Well, this is the latest crisis we have, the war in Ukraine, and the best solution to that is a pathway to peace now. And if we could stop the war today, that's what we should do. Even then, the damage that has been done on the millions of lives that have been affected in Ukraine, but the knock-on effect of what's happened in Ukraine around the world to over 1.8 billion people who are suffering from one of the three of we would say, the crises that is looming on the food systems, food security, a very big issue, the cost of living that has risen as a result. People are going hungry. The cost of fuel, energy crisis that we're looking at, and of course finance, because again here inflation is going up, interest rates are going up, the cost of debt servicing, and putting countries in a position of choiceless choices. Do the debt servicing or pay for social protection or health or education. So these are all issues that we're addressing now in trying to find a solution to, first of all, bringing down the cost of food and getting it to people. And this is through, again, working with Russia and with Ukraine to see that we get grains out of the ports in Ukraine, but also that we are lifting restrictions in Russia so that we can get food to people. That we are looking at the energy crisis. Again, as you rightly said, there is more now dependency on fossil fuel. And we're hoping that this will put speed to the transitions so that the fossil fuel dependency, because of the war, will give a trajectory of more investments in speeding up the green transition. That has its challenges, but on our way to COP27, we hope that we can address many of these as we look to renewables, as we look to see some of the other transition fuels that we will need to address for some regions.
Madam DSG, we're both from the global south, and as you look at the situation there in the context of all the challenges you rightly point out, many nations are still faced with the dichotomy of choosing between economic growth and development and responsible consumption and production. What is it that you think the United Nations can do to ensure that countries are able to grow in a manner that's sustainable, even with the context that we have going on today, and that innovation and developing industries can still be pursued? How do you see the UN's role in maintaining that balance or that choice?
Well, the UN in over 130 countries, our footprint there is to give the support and the policy advice and options to countries on many of the transitions that we speak about within the context of the Sustainable Development Goals. And if you look at the 17 goals, these are signposts to how we can make sure that our economies are more inclusive and they're delivering for young people and for women. That means increasing inclusive growth in our economies. It means looking at the green economy and the transitions on energy, on food systems that will benefit women and children. And I think here what you will see is that those policy options are what we're putting on the table, but we're also in the international community saying that the resources need to follow this as well. And we quite clearly see that resources are available. COP27, we had our investors commit to 130 trillion. Now we have to put in place a mechanism to say, well, how do we get those commitments into flows into these countries to help that happen? So our job is the convening of the partners, the convening of countries and stakeholders to see how we can continue to edge forward on some of the dire needs for investing in the SDGs.
United Nations Deputy Secretary General, Her Excellency Amina Mohammed, thank you so much. And thank you for spreading the hopeful message that I think we all need to hear right now. Thanks so much for the great work that you do always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Zain.
After 2 years of pandemic-induced lockdowns, the world is taking flight again. We are finally returning to some semblance of normality. People are on the move. But will this be back to business as usual, or will it involve building a new business unusual? We get the answers.
Well, this is our part of the Qatar Economic Forum by Bloomberg. I'm so pleased to welcome the Marriott CEO, Tony Capuano, to this part of our conversation. Tony, it is great to see you. I wanted to start. Thank you for joining us. I want to start with the big picture here because we know inflation is rampant. The Federal Reserve and other central banks are raising interest rates, and there is greater conviction now that recession is looming in Europe and the US. What is that doing? How is that showing up in the global travel and lodging industries from where you sit?
Interestingly, at least to date, it's not. The pace of recovery is really encouraging and really consistent. If you looked at the end of the first quarter, obviously we had a bit of an interruption in January and February from the Omicron variant. But in March, our global revenue per available room was only down 9%. In April, it was only down 7%. And in the US, our largest market, we were back to 2019 RevPAR levels. And so all of the potential headwinds you describe, we're monitoring in real time, but we've not seen it in the forward booking data so far.
So hotels clearly are benefiting from revenge travel. In which markets and in what specific ways are you seeing that demand improve this summer?
Well, certainly we've seen the recovery broadly and globally led by leisure travel. But the really encouraging piece for our business is we're also seeing parallel recovery in business transient travel and in group. And in fact, if you look at the forward bookings for group, during our first quarter earnings call, we suggested that in the last 3 quarters of 2022, group demand would be down high single digits to 2019. Based on what we've seen just over the last 60 days, we now believe we'll only be down mid-single digits. And last month, we were only down 6% to 2019. Business transient has been a little slower to recover, but even there, at the end of the fourth quarter last year, we were down about 30%. We're now down only about 10 to 15%. So not as rapid a recovery, but quite steady recovery. The other thing oh, sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no. I want to dig into that business aspect a little bit here because the advent of hybrid and remote work has really blurred the line between business and leisure. And you're seeing people bring their families along with them on business trips. How are you changing up your offerings to capture travelers who are staying at your properties for both work and in many cases for play as well?
You're raising maybe one of the most fascinating and what we think is one of the most enduring trends that'll come out from the pandemic. And that's this idea of blended trip purpose. In our first quarter earnings call, we talked quite a bit about analyzing demand recovery by day of the week. And in a pre-pandemic world, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday were the traditional business travel days. Friday, Saturday, the traditional leisure days. And Thursday and Sunday were weaker shoulder days. Thursday and Sunday have actually been two of the days of the week that have recovered most quickly, which I think empirically illustrates the point you make, that more and more of our guests are combining business and leisure travel. While it is more difficult to modify the physical environment, perhaps, some of the programming that we're doing in terms of fitness, spa, food and beverage is really reflective of those evolving demand patterns.
That is really interesting how Thursday and Sunday have become the big busy days of the week for you. You mentioned modifying the properties. Maybe that's not even necessary because I understand you are competing with Airbnb in offering private homes for rent. Is this a way to prevent customers from leaving the Marriott family, or is this more about capturing a new client base?
I think more the former. When we talk to our customers and what we hear from them informs so many of our strategic decisions, we heard from those customers that for a very specific trip purpose, a multi-bedroom full home better served their needs. And so to your point, the launch of Marriott Homes and Villas really allows us to keep them within that Marriott ecosystem. And during the pandemic, we saw explosive growth in that platform. Pre-pandemic, we only had about 3,000 listings globally. We're now plus or minus about 60,000 listings.
So you had said earlier that summer bookings are looking pretty good. Forward bookings are looking very encouraging. This is, of course, in spite of rising prices on everything, whether it's food to plane tickets to car fuel. What kinds of adjustments or concessions do you see customers making, travelers making against this backdrop of quickening inflation?
Well, again, it varies so significantly by market. If you are in a leisure market, which has recovered most quickly, the pricing power is pretty remarkable. And customers understand that. They may be modifying their dates if that price doesn't fit their budget, or if that budget has been constricted by airline prices or gasoline prices. But we've really seen no slowdown in the strength of that pricing power. We do see some of our customers perhaps picking urban destinations, which have been a little slower to recover and therefore a little more modest in terms of pricing. But in leisure destinations, we've seen remarkable pricing power. In fact, here in the US over Memorial Day weekend, our average rate during Memorial Day weekend was 25% higher Memorial Day weekend in 2019.
Very quickly, Tony, what's an example of a small, imperceptible change that Marriott has made in response to your rising costs as well?
Well, by necessity through the pandemic, we continued, as we always do, to look for operating efficiencies. Although not all of those efficiencies are specifically to cut costs, we think, for instance, through the use and greater adoption of some of the technology we have in place, it creates capacity for our employees to more deeply engage with our guests. And I think you'll continue to look for us to identify those opportunities.
Tony, I want to thank you so much for your time. Tony Capuano is CEO of Marriott.
Thank you very much.
Please welcome to the stage Sebastian Bazin, Chairman and CEO of Accor, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Malika Kapoor.
Sebastian, it's great to have you with us. Thank you for being here.
It's nice of me to be just right behind Tony. It's great. Better that way than the other way.
Better that way, right? We planned it because we knew you were coming here. Excellent. Before we get started, I wanted to take a moment to remind all of you here that we want this to be interactive. So do send in your questions, and a reminder that you have a QR code at the back of your badge, so you can scan that, and that will allow you to send us your questions. So please do that. Sebastian, you know, we are seeing a rebound in travel, but there are challenges. Inflation is a real concern now, and people are starting to think twice about how they spend their money. Yeah. Are you concerned that this dent in consumer confidence could affect travel plans?
You know what? I'm concerned about many things, but let me enjoy the time being. I've been waiting for traffic to be back for 2 years. We have it. So until you tell me it's going to be gloomy, for the time being, it is rosy. It is fine. We have, now it's, but I have my eyes wide open. Of course, we have inflation, both on labor and on energy pricing, and of course on supply, food and others. So it is difficult to cope with. However, we have got one great luck is, and Tony mentioned it, so far for the hotel owners, we have the ability to pass through the entire inflation with a higher price per room. So the margin of the hotel owners are sustained because of the ability to uplift pricing. How long that's going to last? Probably not that long, but I need to tell every hotel owner on this planet, I need them to sustain margin. I actually need them to have better margin, because we've been on our knees for 2.5 years.
Correct.
We've been going through hell. It has been difficult. We've been coping with a lot of tens of thousands of employees to make sure they were safe. So let's enjoy the tailwind. It is there. Let's service the customers at best, and I'll worry about inflation a bit later.
Fair enough. Now, international travel, international business travelers, you know, we're still not at the level we were before the pandemic. So how are you making up for that shortfall? How are your hotels, you know, pivoting perhaps to catering for a more local?
There's two things you do, which is, again, a blessing. And I hope I'm not the only one. COVID has been really tough, but I think we come out personally and professionally as being a different person.
Yeah.
We had time to reflect. We had time to change a lot of wrong habits, norms, standards for the last 50 years. We didn't have time to think. So for us and for our core, there's two things happening now. Number one, and again, Tony mentioned it, you don't know how big is the leisure travel. The numbers of people who really want to regain control of their life, to enjoy meeting other people, and basically discover new places, it is probably twice faster than it's ever been pre-pandemic. And interesting enough, those people go between 2 and 3 hours away from their home. They don't go 5 hours away, and they go by train, they go by car, and they visit places next to their home that never thought about visiting before. And they go, it's true, they go on Thursday night, they come back on Tuesday morning because they have the ability to work remotely on Thursday, on Friday, and on Monday from the hotel. So that business is very strong. The domestic travel, the business domestic, is also back. And it's back because people need to rebound together, they need to see colleagues of theirs, and they need to reconquest different clients. The one thing to be worried about, and I've been saying it a long time ago, 2 years ago, international business travel, cross-continent, a person coming from Seattle to Paris, or Paris to Singapore, I really believe 25% of that business is lost forever.
Forever.
Well, it's lost forever because of what we're doing with Tony and others, because Zoom, WebEx, Teams, it actually works and it's very efficient. And it is a costly travel and it is tiresome. So a lot of CEOs, CFOs of large corporations will ask their colleagues to stay and to do the first meeting by Zoom. That's okay. Because it's okay, because for the same, America, sorry to be so long, for the same cause, which is the digital tool, which may stand for me to lose 25% of that international business travel, it has another side, which is an enormous benefit. That ability to work remotely because of those digital tools makes it happen that I guess people are mixing to their leisure and business.
Leisure.
And they go and work from a hotel. And the one thing I'm looking forward to really get is pivoting. We've been foolish in the hotel industry for so long. There is 7.5 billion people living on this planet. 1.5 billion travel, which is great. So, of course, we cope with 1.5 billion, but there's 6 billion people who do not travel.
Yeah.
And we've done nothing for them. It's about time we wake up. We have big hotels in the centers of wonderful cities for which owners paid hundreds of millions. Let's open the doors, the gate, the bar, the restaurant to the local community.
Local community, yes.
And
exactly.
that is a huge transformation for the hotel industry. And we can cope and we can do it.
Another massive transformation, of course, has been digitization. Now, I went on a trip earlier this year, leisure travel, and I will admit I did not stay in one of your hotels, but when I booked the hotel online, I checked in through my phone before I got to the hotel. I was told to use my phone as a key. Booked room service through an app, checked out through an app. I did not see a human. Is that the future of hospitality?
That is so nice. You said it was not Manaba. Because it would never happen if you was an Accor hotel.
Well, I'm glad to hear that.
I'm going to stop you before you get into the room when you enter the hotel. No,
it's because I miss that. I want the hello and welcome.
Malika, it's schizophrenic for me. I know I need to accept digital technology, seamless process, you accessing your room because you don't want to waste any time. So it's kind of a must. But I hate it. I hate it because I don't want to transform the hotel industry as a motel industry. I want to spend 5 minutes with you. I want to know you. I want to care for you. I want to tell you, why don't you go to next door museum because there's an exhibition. I need to be your guide. I need to be your eyes for you to discover that city in which you are. Otherwise, nobody's going to guide you. So that equilibrium between a digital tool and human touch, I decided not to go for any tech companies. One, because I understand nothing about tech. But two, because I don't like it. Hospitality, exactly the reverse. It's a human capital, warm industry.
Yeah.
And that's what makes us so different. Not better, but just different.
Very true. I want to talk to you quickly about Russia. Some of your competitors have pulled out.
Yeah.
You decided to stay. Why?
Well, it's a very difficult question. It's first, we being the first company 120 days ago to stop any development in Russia, to stop any opening in Russia, to stop any Accor Live Limited loyalty partnership, to of course stop any management operation with any sanctioned people in terms of ownership. We have 60 hotels in Russia and 4,000 people. We've been helping Ukraine, you don't know even how. I went myself to the frontier Belarus, Ukraine. We have also 700 people in Ukraine. We provided a couple 100,000 room nights. We gave job to all the Ukrainians who left and spending a lot of time with Ukraine. I'm just trying to pose and to say that there is vast difference between Kremlin and the Russian population. I'm trying to be a caretaker for those 4,000 people. This is not the best answer. Every day we rethink what we should be doing, but we have legal contract obligation with non-sanctioned hotel owners, and if I were to close, they will run the hotels anyhow.
Correct.
So it's, there's no, I'm telling you, humanly, there's no great solutions. I am 100% behind Ukraine, but clearly we haven't made that decision as of yet. He would not change anything in terms of people probably staying at the hotel. We don't make any money out of Russia, zero. But it's, there's one thing I'm so proud about Accor, is being in existence for over 50 years.
Yeah.
And we've been going through a lot of different conflict, war zone in many different regions, Sub-Saharan Africa and South America. Accor never left the country in the times of debacle, never ever, because we decided to stay. And most of the hotels, you know, are occupied by NGOs, by government officials moving and trying to help resolve situations.
Journalists.
You need journalists. You need those hotels to basically be open for people to basically be witnesses. So again, it's, I may reconsider that decision. It's a tough decision to make.
It's a tricky place to be. Now, I did ask the audience to send in questions, and we do have a great question, so let's turn to that. Would Accor establish a sustainable hotel property in Qatar, maybe in a sustainable area, such as within the Qatar Free Zone? Now, you do have a property opening here in a few months. How eco-friendly is it?
Well, I've been coming to this country since 1991, and probably over a couple hundred times. So I'm a very good friend of this country, and I love this country and the people of this country. So yes, are we going to be doing sustainable in Qatar? We already started. Everything we do in this country has to be done in terms of protecting the workforce, protecting biodiversity. We're doing everything we can, and we made so much progress over the last 10 years now. And the new Qatar Towers properties responds to all of this, and it's going to be an iconic building. So yes, I want that country to grow faster, and I want Accor to be part of it. We can do now carbon-free emission new hotels. You just have to understand there's a 20% additional cost of materials to make it carbon-free from scratch. But okay, that's another, we can talk about it for a couple of hours.
Yes, we can. Absolutely. We'll come back for that conversation. Thank you so much for being with us, Sebastian. Unfortunately, that's it. Look at the clock.
That was quick.
I know, right? I'm going to go complain to the organizers.
Yeah, no, don't. Thank you so much.
Right. Thank you very much. And next up, we have my colleague Stephen Engel in conversation with the CEO of Trip.com, Jane Sun. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'm Stephen Engel, Bloomberg Television's chief North Asia correspondent here in Hong Kong, and I'd like to welcome in our guest, Jane Sun, Trip.com CEO. Jane, great to see you. So obviously, the world has gone up and down as far as the pandemic. Some parts of the world are opening up, other parts, like China and here in Hong Kong, a little bit more restrictive. What is your outlook right now as we come out of this wave in China and also as the rest of the world opens up and airlines are flying at full capacity? What's your outlook for the rest of this year for the travel industry?
Yes, thanks for having me. We remain to be very optimistic about the travel industry in the long run. What we saw in the rest of the world should be very indicative that travel will rebound really rapidly once the border opens. China is a big country with 1.4 billion people, and we know from our data that the pent-up demand is very strong. What we have seen in our trends is concluded in 4 S's. The first one is smaller group, rather than traveling with bigger group before pandemic. Now people try to travel with a smaller group. They normally hire a driver, tour guide with their family or close friends. The second S is people also pay lots of attention to safety. The third S is short booking window. And the last S is people pay lots of attention to sustainability. So in our selection, we indicate the hotels which promotes eco-friendliness, as well as the airlines, which promotes eco-friendliness during their travel. So these are the trends that we have seen so far.
Is it too early to project when China is going to come out of its travel slump, at least domestically? Because Shanghai is just coming out of lockdown. Other areas in China are still having some movement restrictions. Can you kind of have any clarity? Unlike the rest of the world, where like Alaska Airlines CEO says he's never seen it this busy. Other areas are also seeing big bookings for this summer. How down is China this summer?
Yeah, so far after Shanghai lockdown is over, we have seen positive trends, particularly in the southern part of China and the west side of the China. The data we have seen are getting very close for this area towards the 2019 pre-COVID level. So hopefully we can keep the infection of the virus down, as well as boost the travel industry.
Jane, how are you seeing the rising ticket price environment? And of course, jet fuel prices have been rising quite sharply. Is that a deterrent at all? Or are people really latching onto this revenge travel theme and they're willing to pay extra to travel now?
Yeah, so far we have seen the impact is manageable. Lots of people are traveling for business because they need to catch up with their business partners. So the demand is quite resilient. And also the summer holiday is coming. A lot of families are trying to plan with their families for the summer holiday. So we have seen the impact from the fuel prices is manageable so far.
Are you seeing a dramatic increase with the Persian Gulf carriers like Qatar or Emirates really starting to take some of those passengers who want to travel, say, from the, where I am here in Hong Kong to the United States? I have to say, I've been in Asia 32 years, and for the first time ever, I went to the U.S. through Qatar, and later this summer, I'm going through Dubai to get to the U.S. Have you seen a dramatic shift because of either flight bans or reduced capacity across the Pacific that Middle Eastern carriers are getting a big bump up?
Yes, we have seen that the airlines, whoever aboard making the move into the area, have got lots of passengers. So we work with Qatar, we work with all the airlines in Asia. So they have made very good moves to serve the customer in the region.
When do you think we're going to be back to pre-pandemic levels as a global aviation industry?
We are hoping that the global aviation industry can respond to the pent-up demand very quickly once the demand is back to normal. From our data on the back end, the interest for people to travel across the world is very strong. So our team is getting ready, making sure our connectability is there. So once the demand is back to normal, we are able to serve our customers well.
What's the big challenge right now that you see from your vantage point? I mean, I know here in Hong Kong, we have a problem. Cathay Pacific is down to about 2% of its capacity for passenger flights. Its role as a regional aviation hub is seriously restricted because of the COVID restrictions and the lengthy quarantines and the potential flight bans. Can this, from your vantage point, can an international hub like Hong Kong rebound quickly, or is it going to take a long time?
I hope the international hubs can rebound quickly for a couple of reasons. First of all, many of the cities are being opened up. So these cities have been accumulate a lot of experience as well as the data, which will give valuable advice to the cities that is still being opened up later on. Secondly, the vaccine rate for many countries are rising, so that gives more confidence for the people to travel later on. Thirdly, we also have more data from the rest of the world to show how we can make sure people are safe when they are traveling. That also can boost the confidence for the people around the world. So we remain to be optimistic.
Jane Sun, CEO of Trip.com, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
Please welcome to the stage David L. Calhoun, President and CEO of the Boeing Company, and Luis Gallego, CEO of International Airlines Group, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Guy Johnson.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the panel that's going to give you the view of the world from 30,000 feet. We did this panel last year, and the subject then was getting us back into the air. This year, we're back in the air. So now we're back in the air. Where are we going? And will our bags be there when we get there? I'm joined by Luis Gallego. He is, of course, the CEO of IAG, the owner of Iberia, the owner of British Airways, the owner of Aer Lingus. I could go on. And, of course, Dave Calhoun, the CEO of the Boeing Company. Luis, let me start with you. We are back. We are flying. It is fantastic. Everybody wants to go somewhere. They want to go anywhere. Mm-hmm. Demand is very, very strong. How sustainable is that demand?
Good morning, everyone. First of all, I think it's a very good question, and it's a question that we still don't have the answer. So what we see is that we have a very strong pent-up demand. The summer, what we see is numbers that, to be honest, we didn't expect. But also when we see the bookings for the rest of the year and the holiday periods, like Christmas, for example, we still see a high demand and a high number of bookings. So we consider that can be maintained in the future. But we need to see. We don't know how is going to be the behavior of the customer after the COVID. We think there is a change because people in general, we want to travel. I think after 2 years that we couldn't do almost anything, we have realized that to travel is one of the experiences that we want to have in this life. And we think it's going to continue in the long term.
Dave, we don't have a demand problem. We do have a supply problem. It's everywhere. Yeah. How long is it going to last? When is it going to be fixed?
Yeah, it's the shift from a void in demand to now supply issues, to me, is remarkable, the speed with which it happened. But we've experienced what Luis described pretty much with all of our customers everywhere in the world. The supply constraints start with the operator. So the ability to get enough people to handle maintenance, handle the lines, keep airplanes in the air, pilots to fly them, et cetera. So that has dampened the supply side and created some constraints that's so far been well documented here in the U.S. We've had cancellations each and every weekend, et cetera. And then that flows straight through to Boeing and the manufacturing side. We have a big, complicated supply chain with a lot of fragility built into it. And it's always been this way. And so finding those supply constraints and dealing with them when they appear has been a real issue. It's been a real issue for both manufacturers and will probably stay that way, in my view, almost through the end of next year. And the biggest constraint of all for that mid-tier set of suppliers and sub-tier set of suppliers is labor availability.
Yep.
Do we have a workforce that can do this?
Luis, Dave talks about what is happening. He talks about what is happening around the world. It is everywhere, this supply shortage that we're having. And as Dave says, people are really at the heart of it. What's your view? When do you think it's going to be fixed? As Dave says, the news cycle is full of these stories day in, day out. I joked at the beginning about, is my bag going to get there? It is a genuine question. I think a lot of passengers are asking themselves at the moment. How much visibility do you have? When are we going to get supply and demand back into balance?
I think that we have a different situation depending on the different regions in the world, different airports. And in our case, for example, in International Airlines Group, we have several airlines, and the situation that we have in Spain is not the same situation that we have in UK or the situation we have in Ireland. So during the COVID, we needed to do things to survive. And we had, for example, in Spain, a furlough scheme that was very good, and we could maintain all the employment there. And because of that, the ramp-up is easier, because the people, they were prepared to fly. And then they are flying, for example, in Iberia, close to 90% of the capacity they were flying in 2019, with a punctuality close to 90%. So they are not suffering. You can have punctual problems, but in general, operation is very good. But you have, for example, the case of British Airways in London, where we needed to remove 10,000 people because we didn't have any other alternative. We didn't have a furlough scheme like the one we had in Spain. So now we almost stopped the machinery, and now we need to come back and we need to hire people, but in a difficult labor market, because now the pool of people that they are ready to work is smaller. To hire people, for example, to work in the airport, we need a referencing process that can take 100 days, so it doesn't help. So I think we are competing to have people on the ground. We don't have a shortage of pilots, for example, like in other places in the world, like in the US. Our problem is the ground people to attend the aircraft. So I think we have stabilized the operation for the summer. We have reduced the schedule, for example, in the case of British Airways. The idea is to offer to the customer a stable operation for the summer and then after that to improve the punctuality. And I think at the end of the year, we will have, again, the machinery in order.
So end of the year?
I think so. That's the objective we have.
Okay. Dave, the big question everybody's certainly asking themselves in the States is, do we need a recession to fix the problem? Do we need to bring down demand aggressively? The Fed is tightening rates, 75 bips a clip. It clearly wants to slow the economy down. Whether it can deliver a soft landing or whether or not it delivers a hard landing remains to be seen. But they clearly want to slow demand down. Is that what you think is going to be required to bring this supply-demand balance back into kilter?
Yeah, like in Luis's answer to the question, of course, it's not going to affect all industries equally. In the areas and the skills where we compete with other industries, software development, data analytics, computational work, the answer is it probably will help. In some ways, the bubble that seems to want to burst in the growth world in the U.S. has already been felt by our teams with respect to interest levels and staffing up and doing the things that we have to do. But it's unique to those skills.
Right.
And so I won't be championing a recession talk. On the other hand, I have no doubt that some slowdown of some sort will be helpful and will create the stability that we need to then start to respond to the demand in aviation, which still is significant.
Luis, if demand comes down, but it takes a while for the supply side to come back and fuel prices stay high, isn't there a danger that we end up, like it's going to be, you'll feel it in the middle of the P&L, that we end up with actually costs suddenly exceeding demand? How are you going to manage that balance between those two?
It's a very good question, and I think in aviation in general we are used to handle with crisis because we always have one. So I think that we have the ability to adjust the capacity to the demand. I think we have flexibility, for example, with the number of aircraft. During the pandemic, we stopped the 747s, the 340-600 in the case of Iberia. Now we have new deliveries for the following years. But we can adjust the capacity to the demand. Also, for example, I think the configuration that we have in the aircraft now is better for this summer because what we see is a strong premium leisure demand. And it's something that the configuration that we have right now is better for this type of demand that we are experiencing now. So I think it's going to be tough the following months. We need to see what happens with the Ukraine situation, with the fuel price. For us, it's very important. In 2019, it was 26% of our cost, the fuel price. The good thing is now we have a hedge position, above 70% for the rest of the year. But it's true that for 2023, it's only 25%.
Right.
So we need to see the evolution. But yes, what we need to the art of all this is to maintain the cost and to adapt the capacity to the demand. But I think we know how to do it, and we did it in the past.
I was talking to Scott Kirby of United a couple of days ago, just down the road, and he was saying that he now believes that where jet fuel is now, and for those that don't know, it's basically doubled. Where jet fuel is now his base case. He thinks it stays at these kinds of elevated levels. Is that consistent with your thinking?
In our projections, we consider next year is going to be a little lower, but we don't know. We don't have a crystal ball. So what we do always is to be prepared for the worst, and then if the environment is better, we will have better numbers. But I think to have high fuel doesn't mean that you cannot be profitable. And we see in the history of aviation periods of high fuel price where airlines they were profitable. I think it's also
assume high fares.
Yes, and also assumes a level playing field. I think depending how your competitors are hedged, how you can transfer in some way the cost to the price.
If fuel prices stay where they are now, Dave, What does that mean for aircraft demand?
I believe there are two things working on aircraft demand. One is the efficiency of the airplane itself, and I think Luis handled that well so far with price elasticity demonstrating what it is. I think they can maintain more margins at this kind of level. I think the other, which means that the demand scenario for airplanes will continue at the pace it is. I think the other subject that now is becoming as important as the efficiency of an airplane are the emissions of an airplane.
Absolutely.
And sustainability today, the emphasis on it, I don't think it's going to change. I think it's going to get even more severe. We're going to have to meet that demand. Every new airplane, if it replaces or displaces an old airplane, is roughly 20 to 40% more efficient and therefore less emissions than the airplane it replaced. So that in and of itself is one of the biggest and most important levers for the industry to get ahead of emissions. And there are many more, including sustainable aviation fuel and other things. But when we think about fleet planning today, it's almost becoming equal parts efficiency and emissions. And the pressures are going to get more severe, probably not less.
I hear what you're saying on that argument, and I hear it a lot. The problem is, though, that if demand continues and in aggregate demand for travel grows, if demand for travel is growing at 20% and aircraft are becoming 20% more efficient, you're not really getting anywhere. If demand increases by 30% and aircraft emissions increase, and efficiency sort of improves by 20%, you're actually going backwards.
Yeah.
So are we on the right course? Are we on the right track right now? Because you've got a total volume of CO2 produced. Each individual flight may be more efficient, but in aggregate, we're not.
Well, it's all about the displacement. So in other words, there's a current rate of displacement today. For every 2 airplanes an airline buys, they replace 1. And the other one is to handle growth.
Yep.
Right? So if you increase and recapitalize that base in any way, and I believe incentives would be required to do it, you will increase the displacement rate. If you do that, you will bring emissions down. And then the second part of this one is sustainable aviation fuel, which in our case, in 2030, every airplane that we deliver will be capable of 100% sustainable aviation fuel. So something other than jet aviation fuel that we know today. And that is where the biggest improvement will be felt and will come. Again, it depends on displacement rates. You have to replace old with new. Anyway, those 2 factors are, in my view, very different than the last 4 decades. A simple fact that emissions is going to become as important. And I think a lot of policy incentives and a lot of policies are going to have to get written around the world to make sure that that happens.
Yeah, the industry is buying every molecule of sustainable aviation fuel it can right now. We have a feedstock issue, we have an availability issue. Luis, kerosene, though, jet fuel is really expensive. We've already discussed the fact that it has almost doubled. The spread between jet fuel and SAF, therefore, has narrowed significantly. How does that affect you guys have made some big bets on making sure that you can make this transfer work. We live in a time of turbulence right now, but as you see kerosene prices coming up, as jet fuel comes up, that spread narrows. Let me get those words out. How does that affect the timeline? Does it accelerate it? Are you changing your thinking? How are you thinking about that transfer right now?
In IAG, we define a roadmap to arrive in 2050 to net zero emissions, and we were the first group of airlines worldwide to do that. And also, we have the commitment that in 2030, 10% of our flights will be powered by sustainable aviation fuel. So we are buying now all the sustainable aviation fuel that is available in the market. And as you say, it's not enough. So what we are...
So you would buy more if it was ready now, you would buy more?
Yes, I think it's something that is good to do because in the long term, unless we have more plants producing sustainable aviation fuel, we are not going to have enough for everybody. So we are investing a lot of money to try to develop sustainable aviation fuel for our necessities in the future. So I think that what is important is that the governments, they put in place policies to invest in new plants of sustainable aviation fuel. I think, for example, that in Europe, if we want to achieve the objective of the 10% of sustainable aviation fuel in 2030, we need around 30 plants. So what we think is that if we want to arrive to that objective, instead of putting taxes to the fuel in some way, what we need to incentivize is the investment in plants and investment in SAF. And for example, we see that what is happening in the States, I think they are doing very well. They are incentivizing the production of SAF, and is the way at the end to arrive to the objectives that we have.
Okay, I'm going to go to some questions on the floor. We've only got 4 minutes left. Cargo kept this industry going during the downturn. We're now seeing a significantly increased demand for cargo freighters. Dave, what does that demand look like right now? How big a shift is there pre-pandemic to post-pandemic in terms of demand for freighters?
Well, demand for freighters, I mean, it didn't get impacted at all over the pandemic, which is a remarkable, fact. And beyond that, many of the cargo holds in passenger airplanes were filled and flew with very few passengers during this period. So we had an overall very significant increase. Yeah, and we see that demand continuing for quite some time. So our own view is that demand for cargo airplanes specifically, and for the capability to carry cargo on passenger airplanes, that's a differentiator with respect to airplane types. So we'll continue to want to play to that, and I view it as, again, a supplement to demand if you compare it to the couple of decades before the pandemic, and probably one that'll continue for a long time.
Luis, Alicon Cargo?
Yes, we don't have freighters in IAG, but during the pandemic, I think cargo was one of the business that performed very, very well, and I think they continue in that direction. The thing is, as we are recovering the passengers, we have less, in some way, less space for the cargo. Also, during the pandemic, you could fly an aircraft wherever you wanted. Now, the schedule is directed because you have passengers that they want to go from one place to the other, and then in that aircraft we put cargo in the belly. But for us, I think it's going to be a business that is going to continue helping in the future, but we are not going to have the same number of cargo-only flights that we had during the pandemic.
It takes us to kind of what are airplanes going to look like in the future. We've talked about demand, we've talked about sustainable aviation fuel, we've talked about what is going to power the future of flight. Dave, how different do aircraft look, not now, but in 20, 30 years' time? You're in a long-cycle business. Are we going to stick with the kind of the tube and wing model that we currently have? Are aircraft going to look significantly different? It does, in some ways, come back to the sort of freight story as well. What kind of planes are we going to be flying on?
Yeah, I think if you go out 20 or 30 years, which is probably the right way to think about it, because airplane lives last 50 years, typically. I think it's going to just be, it's all about sustainability. Anything and everything we can bring to an airplane to increase its sustainable footprint, that'll be a differentiator if we go out that far. And so I think for our company, that's how we think about it. It's not strictly efficiency. I do think it'll still look like the tube and wing you described, but with a lot of digital tools that allow for optimization of flights, more integration with all, the management systems on the ground, a total commitment to sustainable aviation fuel, and hopefully an industry and a feedstock system that supports it. All of those factors together, and sort of a seal of approval that this is a sustainable airplane for the long term, that will be a bigger differentiator than our historic, process of more efficiency based on a more efficient engine.
Yeah. Gentlemen, oh, sorry, Luis.
No, I was going to say that also in our road plan to net zero emissions, we consider that the new technologies and hydrogen will be key. We don't know what's going to happen in 30 years, but we are sure that maybe in the next 20 years we will have hydrogen aircraft flying with but a small aircraft. I think the wide body, you know better than me, but it's going to take more time to have a solution.
Hydrogen and electric, they're coming, without a doubt. It's just the time frame to 2050. It'll probably affect much smaller airplanes on those two fronts. And then someday, maybe in that next second half of the century, we can get there in the big ones.
They're coming, we're going. Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed. We greatly appreciate it. Dave Calhoun, Luis Gallego, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you, Guy.
Thank you.
Rising inequality in the world today puts society at a higher risk than before. In particular, it threatens to rob children of their future. What can developing countries do to ensure a more equitable and just world? One energy superpower will give us its view, but first, let's take a look at the power shift happening on the highway.
I'm here with Herbert Diess, the CEO of Volkswagen. Herbert, thank you very much for joining us. We want to talk about all of the challenges and opportunities facing the sector and put those in the context of energy, and that's the part of our day that this interview fits in. So let's focus in on energy. Let's start with the energy transition, the move to electric vehicles. How are you doing in that move to electric vehicles, given all of the headwinds and the challenges that the auto sector faces right now?
Actually, we're doing very, very well. I think we were within the first to decide and to commit to electromobility, and it's paying off now. We are ramping up plant after plant. We are introducing new EVs. We have a full range, the widest range of EVs in the world market. Latest, I would even say iconic car behind me, which was very, very well received. So we're doing well. We are, in a few days, we are going to groundbreak for our second gigafactory producing batteries, though actually it's no headwind. It's the wind is helping.
On that, okay, a tailwind then, conversely. So are you saying then you're able to find sufficient supplies of batteries? Is that not a challenge?
Actually, we are according to plan. No, we always said that by 25 we would sell about 20% of our product portfolio electric, and we are fully on that plan for ramping up.
Okay, from commodities that you use in the cars to commodities that you use to make the cars, clearly there's a lot of focus on energy supply to Germany and energy supply to many parts of Europe. Are you concerned about the possibility that gas could be cut off either by Europe or by Russia?
I think everyone is concerned, no, because Europe and the northern part of Germany, where we are living, is especially prone to Russian gas supplies, and it's not so easy to change fast. I think a lot of progress has made, to buying more liquid gas from the US, from other parts of the world. So there's a lot in the ramp up, but it's going probably not fast enough if there would be a major disruption. I think everyone is preparing well, though everyone is looking for alternatives. Here at the plant in Wolfsburg, for instance, we still have 2 coal-fired power plants, which are on the ramp down because we are just in the process to substitute with gas, but we have some flexibility in shifting. So yes, we are concerned, but also we are preparing.
But the fallback plan involves more fossil fuels then in the short term?
In the short term, no, not on the long term, because at the end, renewables are becoming so competitive, so cheap, that there is no way around renewables anymore, and they're just more competitive.
Yeah, I'm talking to you for the Qatar Economic Forum, of course, and I know that Qatar is a big shareholder in Volkswagen. And I wonder if you have had, and you've talked about other sources of LNG from the US and elsewhere. Well, one of those elsewheres is from Qatar. Have you or your team been having conversations? Have you been involved in conversations about getting more LNG from Qatar?
Not directly, because we are not purchasing direct gas or liquid gas. It comes from the German network in our case, but I'm sure that there have been discussions and support from Qatar to make sure that the ramp up for liquid gas can go faster. Also, now it's it will take time because it's a ramp up of capacity. The gas is there, but it requires infrastructure build up. On the long run, I'm sure that we become independent from Russian gas.
Yes. Can I ask you about the demand situation then at this point? I mean, globally, of course, structurally, you have a big tailwind there because the move to electric vehicles maybe causes more people to go out and buy cars. But cyclically, I wonder if inflation pressures, fears about the cost of living, whether those are weighing, whether those problems that consumers might face are weighing on demand at all.
No, we don't experience it until now. No, it might happen. I would say next year or in 2 years' time. It depends on the economic cycle which we are going to see. But we have a very, very good order bank. On the EVs, it's roughly 1 year, and even on the ICE cars, we have very good order bank. So we don't see customer demand going down or coming down currently, but that might change.
Can I ask you about the Chinese market and Chinese demand? Clearly, China is in a very different place when it comes to the COVID fight, and lockdowns have been having a real impact on the number of vehicles that have been sold in that market. What are your up-to-date expectations there?
Yeah, actually, also it's quite positive news out of China. We have been very much, let's say, hit by the situation in China because our plants are in the most COVID-prone areas in Shanghai and up there in Changchun. And our plants basically have been shut down for several weeks. But they're now in the northern part, they're close to 100% operational already, so 85%. And Shanghai is also following swift. So we're still optimistic that we can meet our 2022 targets in China because we have a recovery plan in place, huge incentive programs from the government into automotive demand. So we're still confident that we can meet our targets even in China.
Global supply chains, as you'll know, Herbert, and we've talked about many times in the past, have been disrupted by the recovery from COVID, and we still live with that. I wonder if you think about those disruptions to the global supply chain. Do you think about those as, when will they normalize? Or do you think we have to get used to living with a new kind of normal?
I think we have to make some adjustments. No, we need a little bit more buffers. We have to think about second sources in many cases. So we need a more robust supply chain in the future. That's for sure. We are working on that. On the other hand, we see that also supply situation is improving. Semiconductors in the second half of the year, the outlook is much better. We still will have constraints through this year, probably also next year, but we see an improvement, continuous improvement of the situation. We have been hit hard, especially by the supplies from Ukraine, which we could also cover for, and they are leveling out. Or the constraints from Ukraine also won't, let's say, reduce our ambition and targets towards the end of the year. And worldwide, the disruptions in logistics, yes, no, it's causing some trouble, but normally we are able to recover, to find ways around and to adjust. The supply chains are quite flexible, and there will be one or the other disruption still, but we can manage. So all in all, I'm not too pessimistic for this year.
Okay. Can I ask you about the new standardized software system at VW? There's been much talk or speculation that some important new cars like the Porsche Macan, the new Audi electric model, could be delayed by not managing to get this new standardized software system ready. Can you update us on that at all, Herbert?
Yeah, actually, it's I'm really pleased with the progress Volkswagen is making. The new cars are well received. We get really some applause from public and the audience and the customers of the functionality of the cars. We have very sophisticated driver assistance functions, automated overtaking, lane change, new parking functions. It's really working nicely. Though Volkswagen is really through that process. And also the volume brands, Audi and Porsche, they're having a challenge with the launches, but I'm sure that with the competence of Porsche and Audi combined with our steadily growing software competencies, they also will manage.
How long will that take, do you think, Herbert, to get those on track? We've heard some people talking about maybe a solution needs to be presented within 3 weeks. Is that the right timeline?
You know, we are discussing more structural changes. The build-up of software competences to a level where we are, I would say, 90% self-sufficient. That will take a decade or so, no? Because we are still buying teams, companies worldwide, investing heavily in China, in the US. So, and it's coming along well. And we have to once again increase our efforts to build up this capacity to be self-sufficient on the software side. We have to increase those efforts. And that's what we're going to discuss within the next weeks.
Okay. Just briefly, Herbert, on Porsche, are you sticking with your plan to IPO the Porsche sports car brand in the fourth quarter? Is that timing still on target?
Yes, we stick to the plan.
Okay. Herbert, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us. Herbert Diess joining us there, the CEO of Volkswagen for the Qatar Economic Forum.
Thank you very much.
Please welcome to the stage His Excellency Hage Geingob, President of the Republic of Namibia, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jennifer Zabazaja.
His Excellency, thank you so much for sitting down with me and for joining us today. So much to talk about, so much richness that's happening within Namibia. But I wanted to start here. Namibia currently has one of the highest levels of unemployment on the continent of Africa. South Africa, of course, has the most. How has the current situation with Russia and Ukraine affected your country?
Thank you very much. Let me first thank the ruler of this country who invited me to be here, and also Bloomberg, giving me this opportunity. Well, firstly, I would like to talk about what I think is a problem in Namibia, that of inequality. Whether other situations happen now or so on, there was inequality. We had apartheid, the ruling Namibia for a long time. We waged a war of liberation, and therefore we freed the country. Now our aim is to unite our people, because exclusivity spells, conflict. Inclusivity spells harmony. I believe in that. So we have to be inclusive in governance, and therefore include everybody, tribe, race, to run Namibia. We're trying to do that. Without that, you can talk about addressing poverty, creating jobs, if there is no good governance architecture, that of what I call third wave African leaders. Because Africans used to have first wave leaders who were very important people who told us to get up and fight for our freedom. That is Kwame Nkrumah, Sekou Touré, and that, like little gods, highly respected. Second wave were caught up in a Cold War confusion, one-party state, military coups, and so on. Now, third wave leaders are coming, they're not big people. Physically, I'm big, but I'm not Mandela or Zemnioma. So we come through constitutional means, honoring term limits, come through democratic process, honoring term limits, dealing with processes, systems, and institutions. So that if I agree with you today, as I'm in government, come and invest there in that country, and I go, it shouldn't stop. Right. But there will be processes, systems, and institutions, our courts. Right. Our courts are very independent. Right. So that's what I will start with. As for current situation that is happening, before this happened, Africa had problems.
The war,
before the war you are referring to, Africa had problems. We had this inequality question, separation. We are dealing with that. It was not caused by the war. We had whites who had all the privileges, blacks who were left out. Now we are saying we cannot chase the whites out or grab from them and give to the blacks. Let's hold hands and build our country together. That's what we have been doing.
dig into that a little bit more, because if, of course, the situation was not great prior to the war, but I imagine there has been an impact and something that you, during your term, have had to respond to. So can you dig into some of the initiatives that you have tried to address when it comes to unemployment, when it comes to inequality?
Yeah, I want to make it very clear. Not because of the war, which just started. We have been in that country now, ruling it for about 32 years. And I'm dealing with the systemic inequality that is caused by racial apartheid practices. We are addressing that. We therefore address the education, because education is the key to everything. We put people to schools, but that, what we have done, causes trouble now. Because when people get degrees, they don't have jobs. So they are now having degrees and they are in the streets. It is the thing I have to address before the war even started. And that's why I'm saying inequality everywhere, before the war, everywhere. Inequality is not good. But Africa is left out in certain things, not because of war, before the war. There are Africans who were killed in Africa. We didn't react the way we are reacting now, because they're African lives. Even during this war, when Africans were trying to cross, some were stopped, not to go to Poland. So I don't want to go to that. Let's talk about Namibia, because if you take me there, I will talk a lot.
Well, I mean, part of the situation that has gotten worse, and we know that it has gotten worse, is the climate situation. How has that affected Namibia?
Namibia is highly affected. Right now, I was told it was raining and snowing in a desert. Namibia is affected by climate change. It's a semi-desert country, by huge drought and field fires and so on are taking place. Therefore, also coming now to a new dispensation, we are thinking of now dealing with new things. First, we have a big dam that we have created to provide agriculture in the south, which is dry. And now also we are thinking of having new ways of doing things, thinking of the green hydrogen. We want to be champions in that one. We have started, we already offered some people to give us their positions, how they are going to benefit Namibians. So they are going to work, they are going to give us their proposals, and we are going to let them go on. It's still open, but that's a new thing that everybody is interested in, and we are willing to welcome them.
How do you ensure that Namibians are going to benefit off of that and bigger producers aren't going to come in?
That's the point. When people are offering what they can do, we have conditions. What are you going to do for Namibians? How many Namibians, role of Namibians, and so on. And what they can also do to ordinary persons. Not only creating jobs, but what they can do as a good citizen, corporate citizen.
And where does, oh, there's your water. Where does oil fit into that as well? Because we've also heard some discussions around Shell and other bigger producers coming in. Are you having any discussions with them, or where are you at this point in time in producing some of these reserves?
We are very lucky towards the end. When I came here, I was told that people have discovered oil and gas. Now, what we are trying to supposed to get off this fossil fuel, we are discovering some big numbers, and we are saying there's no contradiction. The green hydrogen thing is a long-term thing, maybe about 20, 30 years. This one will be shorter term, and definitely we welcome that. I told Total and those who discovered oil there, with the Qatari government, that we are very happy about that. We must see how the oil cannot be a curse. It must benefit Namibian people and also those who are investing.
What are you telling them to ensure that that is happening?
Well, I'm not telling them to say give Namibians shares now. I'm just saying basic, not me, not us who are the Nova rich. It should be common people. So the housing schemes could be created, it could be creating jobs for them, not just to sit and ask for handouts. But they are going to create jobs, they will employ our people, they will train them. Already, German government gave us 40 million euros so that we can now train our people in the new energy transition, and also to set up an institution to train Namibians on green hydrogen. These are the things we are busy with.
Is that in the short term, or is that in the long term when you?
Well, it will be short and long term. Short term because we have to prepare. It's a new concept. It's a new approach. We didn't know about this green hydrogen and ammonia and so on. So we have to be trained. People have to be trained so that they must participate, not to be observers when they are going to work on it. And
do you need more support from the global community, especially when you talk about climate and when you talk about the potential for green hydrogen? Africa is, of course, one of the biggest continents with a growing population. Do you need more support from the West to ensure that Namibians are benefiting and heading in the right direction in terms of climate?
Yes.
See?
First, let's talk about this uninvited guest, COVID. COVID made us to realize we are in one universe. It affected everybody, rich, poor, black. So that one made us to realize we are in this universe, we are one. That helped us to think twice about how to help Africa and so on. Africa also to create their own vaccination and so on, not to depend on others. That's one. Besides that, with this green hydrogen, and also Namibia, I say, was a child of international solidarity, midwife by United Nations. So we really are working with all world countries to invite them to come to Namibia. It's a peaceful country. Although we fought the war, we are holding hands with our brothers, black, white, yellow, and we invite people. We have peace, we have good governance, we have term limits in Namibia. We don't die in office. My term is about to end, and I'm preparing for that. I'm already a third president in short term of time. So good governance, peace are very important things.
How closely are you working with your neighboring countries to get on board with these initiatives?
All of them, because SASL is very important to us. They will be the off-takers, we cannot use all of it. So already they are involved too, they are starting. I talk to them, my experts, not me, talk to them to tell them this is what we are trying to do. We also are informing AU as all, because they are Africans. And they must also come in. If they have expertise somewhere, I'd rather have African to come and work with me than a European.
And on this topic, we were talking a little bit about this before. There's been a lot of discussion around Cyril Ramaphosa in South Africa, and also potential controversy about what happened at his farm, and potentially discussions that the two of you have had. Can you share about more what it is that you've talked about? Have you had any conversation about the situation that happened?
Namibia was South Africa's colony. We fought and kicked them out. Cyril is the president of South Africa. I'm the president of Namibia. I have my farm too. So please, what is happening in South Africa is South Africa's problem. We have answered. I didn't help him anyway. The person crossed over through canoe, he was reported, eventually arrested, appeared in the court, sent just for that violation, and was sent out. He went out on his own. That's my story ends.
Why do you think that so much is being talked about it then?
Oh, it's a big problem in South Africa, not in Namibia. It's a big issue that you found money, cash, and of course that is a well-to-do man too. That's for him to answer, of course. But to bring me in, I'm Geingob for Namibia, not for South Africa. That's a problem in South Africa. And South Africans are dealing with it.
And let's just finish on one last problem that is affecting a lot of the world. And when we talk about inflation and we talk about what Namibians are paying right now, what is it that the government is doing to support Namibians now?
Well, firstly, we had a package to help them after this. The government put up about 8 billion to give to small and business people to bail them out during that time. But again, our economy is not doing well. Ever since I took over, we had a severe drought, the commodity prices went down, and as we're trying to navigate from that, this disease came. But now we are seeing green lights, at the end. Growth rate is about going to be 3%. So with that, we are going to take care of our people. So we are there for. They are our bosses, our sovereigns. Without taking care of them, they kick us out. So to listen to them. They are very angry, of course, the young people whom we educated because we valued education very much. And therefore we send them to school grade. We subsidize our universities. Now they go and get degrees. They are unemployed. And that is serious kind of sitting on a powder keg. So we have to be careful. Our young people are very impatient everywhere. And if we don't address that issue, all what I'm talking about will go up in smokes.
Yeah, there's a lot to pay attention to. His Excellency, thank you so much for your time, and thanks to everyone for listening.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you to all of this morning's leaders for your valuable insights into some of our most pressing challenges. We're now going to take a quick break, and when we return, our next session will be focusing on the new consumer. So please join us back here at 11:30. Thank you.
The pandemic has reached classrooms globally. We've suffered massive learning losses, but it also ushered in a very important change that needed to happen a very long time ago, and that's the systemic shift of education towards an approach that's more reflective of the future that we're entering in. Now, while that might be the positive impact it's had, I don't want to downplay at all the devastating impact it's had on learning loss, on teacher burnout and shortages, on students' mental health, violence. So with a positive ushering of change has come all of these very horrible realities as well. So I would say that it's been great for us as educators and those working on a more kind of macro policy level, because we've been able to create change that we may not have been able to because people were very open, people's mindsets were open to that transformation. But from a grassroots level of students in the classroom and for teachers and for principals, it was very sad to see across the Middle East, across the subcontinent, and across South Asia, the impact on the students.
When the biggest threat to wildlife was poachers, it was very easy to identify the bad guys. You know, the bad guys were the guys with the guns, and they're out there gunning down animals illegally and robbing our countries of this great wealth, elephants and rhinos and many other species. But now the major threats to our wildlife are developments like farms. So the biggest challenge I face now is the bad guys actually seem to be good guys. They're producing food. They're generating income. They're responding to food insecurity and creating jobs. And this, in a way, is very hard to counter with a conservation need, which may not provide all those benefits. So my biggest challenge now is how do we, as conservationists, not just educate, but transform the mindsets of our leadership to really appreciate the great biodiversity of our countries and our continent.
Every day, Qatar Airways carries some 7,000 tons of cargo around the world.
The more we fill it, the more money we make.
But the aviation industry is facing severe challenges, among them its impact on climate change.
We have a vision to be net zero as early as possible. The challenge we face is the machine we operate.
Watch our exclusive report from aboard a cargo freighter at the Qatar Economic Forum. Join us in Doha this June.
With crypto, remittances are less expensive, both for the person sending it and for the person receiving it. Because as we all know, Western Union and other transfer companies take a huge percentage in terms of fees. So there's that. But what the pandemic has also done is that it has accelerated trends like work from home. And what that does is it makes it easier for people to apply for certain jobs remotely. So that means that software engineers in any part of Africa who have a good internet connection can apply for any job, provided they have the skills. And then, this is important, they can now get paid, right? Without all the bother of their paycheck being sent in one currency and transferred into their local currency. So that is going to be a huge game changer because it means that Africa can compete in the labor market.
what are the lessons we can take from COVID, I think, is the importance of primary care and having a robust outpatient primary care healthcare infrastructure. So if, the hospitals are good, but they have limited capacity, and you need to be able to treat things, especially as the global south transitions epidemiologically from infectious disease and acute illness to chronic disease. It requires a different type of care. So it's more specialist care, more sort of home care models or outpatient models. And that's something that the U.S. has had to adapt to over the last, say, 30 years, but it's something that the global south will need to adapt to going forward as diabetes cases increase and heart failure and just everything that comes with an aging society, but also with a richer society where people are better fed and in some cases overfed. So I think that's something we can look forward to.
Qatar is building the city of the future. Lusail is a 15-minute drive north of the nation's capital. And it's where this 80,000-seat stadium will host the final of the 2022 FIFA World Cup. Sheikh Khalid bin Khalifa Al Thani is the chairman of the city's developer.
The idea of developing a city came from having a modern and smart city in the state of Qatar.
In the Marina District, Lusail looks like the downtown area of any major global city, say Chicago. A grid of wide promenades, sprawling avenues, and sparkling high-rises. But you need to go beyond for a sense of the true scale of this place.
17 years after this project was first established, there's still work to be done. Lusail's Marina District is going to look pretty built up by the time World Cup fans arrive here in November. But neighborhoods like this one will still take years to complete.
Part of the reason why is that another subterranean city has been built just below the surface.
You can walk around, you can have those small buggy cars go in to do all the maintenance, all the pipelines that you don't see.
Heavy dependence on air conditioning makes Qatar and its Gulf neighbors some of the highest carbon emitters in the world on a per capita basis. But planned cities might be the solution.
One day, tram lines like this will connect Lusail's residential neighborhoods with its business downtown, making commuting via public transit an option for thousands of people, which is great in the comfortable winter months. But in the summer, when highs regularly top 110 degrees Fahrenheit or 43 degrees Celsius, the question remains, will people want to ride the tram?
It's a new concept, but it's been adopted really quickly by the people who are residing in Doha or in Lusail.
Yeah, what do you think the mentality shift is? Is there a way you're going to encourage folks to try and use public transit
It will
more?
take time. It will take time to shift, but we've seen this time is shifting quickly than has been anticipated.
Another daunting task, filling this place with people. Lusail will soon be able to house as many as 250,000 of them. But migrant workers aren't the target clientele, cutting out more than half of residents. But whether the city will attract enough upper-middle-class professionals is still a question mark. Lusail was built with Qatar's natural gas revenue, an engine of its historical growth that's only been revved higher into gear amid a global energy crisis. But in many ways, this city represents Qatar's vision for the future. Clean, green, and a magnet for skilled, educated workers. A symbol, perhaps, of the transformation that may be needed to maintain the country's place on the global stage.
Welcome back, everyone. Just a quick reminder to you that we would love to hear from you today. So you can ask our speakers questions. Just turn to the back of your badge, and there's a QR code there, and scan it and ask your question. We also want you to engage with us on social media using the hashtag Qatar Economic Forum. From planes, trains, and automobiles to hotels, retail, and tourism, we are returning to an in-person world again. Let's hear now about the new consumer.
Please welcome to the stage Michael Ward, Managing Director of Harrods, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Francine Lacroix.
Everyone, and Michael, thank you so much for joining us. I mean, you've had quite a couple of years.
Absolutely. Let's say it's been an interesting time, as the British would say.
Interesting times, the most understated thing the British always say. There's COVID. Harrods has had to look at other ways, really, to attract customers, attract business. How has COVID and lockdown changed you?
I think it was a real wake-up call for us. We'd become a tad complacent. And what we then had to do was to reinvent ourselves yet again, but faster, better and better. So what we did is we created things that people really wanted in essentials, but really at the top of anybody's expectations. Whether or not it's creating the finest hairdressing salon in the world, or whether or not it's giving the greatest density of Michelin-starred chefs of every building in the world. What you used to do was good. What you now have to do is to be exceptional.
And this means what? Being closer to your customers, so personal shopping virtually, for example.
We created private shopping that people could access anywhere in the world, and we'd make sure that they got whatever they want, and that facility is still open. But what we're seeing as people get back into travel, that love of going into the Palace of Knightsbridge has not changed, and people are coming back, particularly from America and the Middle East, and really experiencing what we've done, because while we were closed, actually we had more builders in the building than anyone else, and we've transformed it, and I think it's that transformation that's important.
But I guess you have two things. So first of all, it's the most famous, retail shop in the world, but then you also have very loyal customers. How do you do that loyalty?
I think it's also the two are linked so inextricably. People's loyalty comes from coming to see the most beautiful products, getting the most fantastic service. We don't advertise, it's all word of mouth, because people in that genre come and collect as individuals. So it is a self-fulfilling prophecy. If we find really unique products that nobody else can find, then I'll guarantee our very, very discerning customer will come and find us.
Give us a flavor, Michael. Like, unique products like what?
About 3 weeks ago, we had the pleasure of having access to a £420,000 bag, which was coveted by several young ladies, but unfortunately, there is only one. There'll only ever be one in the world, and it was only available from one store.
And so I imagine that actually the relationship between you and also on the other side, right, the people that make the bags, some of these fashion houses, has to be extremely strong if they give you exclusivity.
It is unbelievably strong because they also want to create this aura, and this aura of their brand being part of that luxury experience at Harrods adds value. Whoever you are, whether it is in a Chanel, a Hermes, or a Vuitton, they want to be part of that experience, and therefore we're fortunate of positioning ourselves at the forefront of it.
Michael, is there a limit to how much luxury you can sell? We're going through huge economic shifts. Is there also a limit on how much some of these luxury companies can charge for their items?
I think people always say that the luxury bubble will burst. I think we had it when people said that digital watches were going to take over from mechanical watches, and I have a waiting list on every mechanical watch. The Chanel 2.55 has increased in value by 11.75% per annum for 25 years. That's one hell of a bubble. So no, I don't think there is any limit. And we still have inquiries. We've currently got a customer who wants to buy a $64 million ring.
I mean, online?
Not online.
I'm getting some great questions from the audience. How is Harrods trying to appeal to Gen Z?
It appeals through different categories. So we have uniqueness of product in things such as cosmetics and toiletries. So when Gucci launched its range of cosmetics, you only could buy it at Harrods. When Hermes launched, you could only buy it at Harrods. So getting in through accessible product categories is hugely important. And then through our CRM system, we capture data and we trade you up from the cosmetic through to the purse, through to the handbag, and ultimately into apparel.
Michael, what's Harrods' best kept secret?
Oh gosh,
there are many.
I literally, if you were here, I'd be here for an hour and a half. Whether or not it's the myriad of underground corridors that get the product that nobody ever sees, to some of the most amazing services that we probably are very poor at advertising, but the customer will never find.
But you're also extremely savvy in using AI to understand your customers, to understand actually what they want and help them shop.
It is, but AI is actually transforming the world. And as we are, we've got millions of pieces of data. For the machine to actually present it to us in a way that we can then respond to is becoming increasingly important. And it's all then about customer service. We're not sending something or talking about things people don't want. We know what you like, and therefore we'll look at a new season. And the great thing for us is having that data and being able to ring somebody up and saying, actually, we know you like this. We've just got it in your size in the new season. Would you like to keep it for us? And that's a service that nobody else can provide.
Does that mean how much do you invest in sales assistants?
The experience of sales assistants is absolutely paramount for us because they're the final touch point of that customer. It's about making sure the experience is perfect, and we have lots of feedback. So our response and loop service of customers, and we act on every one of those responses. And we talk to sales assistants when we don't get proper service. So that's absolutely at the center of everything. We've just launched a concept called Hage Beauty, which is a Sephora but cute and playful, but high-end and low-end. The key differentiator is Harrods service is in Hage Beauty. And when we've taken it to Edinburgh, the people have been shocked. They haven't been served properly by a sales assistant for 5 years.
I mean, I was going to ask you actually how we shop differently now. So a lot of people are saying, look, you no longer wear ties. It's all about athleisure wear and leisure wear. But actually, I imagine at Harrods, there's also ball gowns flying off the shelf.
No, but ball gowns are still an important feature. During lockdown, we sold several ball gowns to people who wanted to dress up properly for Strictly Come Dancing. So that's the type of world that we live in. But I think it's the agility to react that I think is important for us. So absolutely, during lockdown, in a department of men's that we changed only 2 years ago, we fundamentally changed back to being smart casual because suits, as you say, are no longer there.
How important is the English identity of the Harrods brand? Another question from the audience.
The English identity is fundamentally important. All of our visitors, particularly from overseas, come because we're quintessentially English. People say, what do you do for the GCC customers? What do you do for the Chinese customers? Absolutely nothing other than give them great service and product. They come to Harrods because it's quintessentially English. And that will always be there.
Can you give us, again, a flavor of some of also the experience you provide? I mean, a lot of people will see Harrods as a place to shop, but you do a lot more for your special customers.
We do it for all of our customers. I mean, the key that one of the things we brought into was wellness. And as we've gone through the pandemic, the wellness has been something that's been locking into that customer base. We have a service called eSculpt, which will give you a beach body within 6 weeks. It is fully booked. But we do dietitians, we do all of these things, and it builds a relationship that isn't about shopping. It's about a partnership. It's about being a trusted advisor. And that's an important part of what we do.
I mean, Ed in the audience is asking, is your suit from Harrods? Which I think is a brilliant way to end. Is your suit from Harrods, Michael?
Everything I wear is from Harrods. I do get staff discount.
Thank you so much for joining us today.
No, it's always a pleasure. Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Thomas Naroxte, CEO of Joe and the Jews, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Malika Kapoor.
Thomas, great to see you. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
And just a quick reminder to all of you, once again, we'd love to have you involved, so do send us your questions. The QR code is on the back of your badge, so you can scan it and send us your questions. That would be great. Thomas, now we know that the pandemic was really challenging for the food and beverage industry, but your sales tell a slightly different story. You had an amazing quarter in the third quarter of 2021. That was your strongest sales quarter ever. How are sales looking now?
Even better.
Amazing.
So that's
really?
amazing. We just had our best month ever in May. And what the pandemic did to us, it was a real curse, as it was to everyone in the industry, but it also forced us to really look at what we had done in the years up to the pandemic, what we needed to redo in our operating model. But then also it gave us the possibility to really the digital transformation happening in an industry, to really give it a big push. And that's where we see the benefits today, that the sales channels we did not have prior to the pandemic are now an important part of our business.
So digitization is what's behind this spike in sales?
Partly. So now digital turnover is 30% of our total sales. But with that said, even the turnover in our stores are above 10% to what we saw prior to the pandemic.
And the digital transformation means you introduced your app, for example, which makes it very easy to
I
order.
hope that everyone here has downloaded it or will download it, as we will open up in Doha in the next 2 months. But it enables you to pre-order, and it goes back to some of the real trends that we look at. We talk about the 4 pillars in our industry, convenience being one of them, and this is where technology is helping us so communicate with our consumers, but also enabling them to pre-order, so the products will be ready, specified to their request when they come to our store.
And I know you're focusing heavily on the Middle East. You're opening stores not only in Doha, but across the region. So can you give us a sense of where you're opening in the region and some numbers?
Yes, we are very excited, and when we look at our stores in London, it's like our turnover is down in West London, in Mayfair and Marylebone by 40% during the Ramadan. So you can see that we have some confidence when we go into the Middle East market. We've been waiting for many years. Now we're ready. We've been talking to, I would say, 100 partners here. Very happy with the partners that we chose in the end, who really speak our brand, and that has been the most important thing. People that we believe that really understand who we are and are able to communicate the same DNA as we do in Europe and the US. So in the Qatar, we will open in September. In the UAE, we will open in August. And in Saudi Arabia, we will open in September. And then following with the Q8, that also will see openings here in 2022. So by the end of the year, we'll have 10 units open in the region.
And are the units you're opening in the Middle East, are they going to have a franchise model, or are you going to own them?
This is like a new way of operating for us.
Yep.
It will be franchise partners. But as I said before, the partners that we have chosen in the region, we have chosen them very selectively, having a number of discussions with them, not only looking at their credentials, but also how they understand our brand and resonate with our brand.
Now, I have to ask you about your IPO. There is a lot of curiosity about your IPO. When might that be, and where do you think you'll list, the US or back home in Denmark?
Timing, we are owned by private equity, so we always need to be ready to go to the big stage. For me, as management, we do believe, and it also is in agreement with our shareholders, that an IPO is a very feasible next step for Joe and the Juice. We have great growth plans going forward to really be like a high grower in the industry. And where do I see our peers? It is not as much in Denmark. It's more likely in the US.
More likely in the US.
Is
in terms of timing, you must have some idea.
Probably sooner rather than later. So
how soon?
In the next 12 to 24 months, you are more likely to see us.
Okay, next 12 to 24 months. Yeah. Now, I want to talk to you about inflation. It's been a really important topic over here. It's come up with a number of speakers. It's a real concern. People are feeling it, and it's affecting the way people spend, right? And people are really looking at their money and asking themselves, can I live without this? How are you going to convince people that they can't live without their 6-pound Joe and the Juice?
We need to have great respect for this current inflation environment we are in. It's new for all of us. But with that said, we do believe that we are a high-frequency, low-ticket operator, and therefore also where we operate is mainly in locations in the bigger cities with a higher disposable income, and we really need to communicate with our consumers so it's part of their daily lives. So while everything else looks dark and bleak, then the coffee and the juice that we can give them will be what gives them the energy to go through the day and also to the other side at the end of when we return to a more normal environment again.
So we've got a great question from the audience. Yeah. Are you changing your menus or localizing it for the Middle East?
We will largely have the same menu as we do in Europe and the US, but we will localize it. We will listen to the taste of the consumer. In the Middle East, we see probably more people will stay in our bars for longer. We will also look at having more for the sweet mouth in the Middle East. So we will definitely looking at doing some localization, but 80% will be the same.
Okay, so I know you've got major expansion plans in the Middle East. What about looking further? China, for example, that's a massive market, something you can't really afford to ignore if you have global ambitions.
Very true, but for us, it was very easy to look at the Middle East as the first market, real big expansion market outside of Europe and the US, especially because we have seen that people really, or the people from the Middle East really like our products when they visit the Europe and the US. So we will use the Middle East to really learn from you, adapt here, and then we can be ready for the Asian markets in the coming years.
I want to talk to you about sustainability. And I was surprised, pleasantly surprised, to find out that your food waste is about 2%, and that's lower than the industry standard. What are you doing right to reduce food waste?
It's a made-to-order concept, so we only produce what you order, and we are very aware of not having things prepared, because then you have to dispose of them after a number of hours. In our concept, the apple that we do not use today, we can use tomorrow. It's a key KPI that we measure our bar managers on a continuous basis, and it's very important in our global footprint. And also, when we were talking about the pillars, we were talking about convenience. The entertainment is really important to us. The health aspect is very important to us, really limit the amount of processed sugars in our products. And finally, the ESG is very important to us, and then the waste is one element in our industry, which is a big problem, where we are on the forefront, but we have many other areas where we really are focusing on in the coming years as well, so we can leave this world in a better state than where we came.
Speaking of health, I want to bring in this question, and we have a question from the audience. Would you incorporate more sustainable ingredients such as protein alternatives, and maybe also consider Qatar to be part of your sustainable supply chain? So first part, protein alternatives on your menu?
Definitely, and if you look at where we have been developing in recent years, it's been a lot of plant-based alternatives. If you look at our menu, it's like the meat protein is rather limited on our menu, and going forward, you will also see more plant-based alternatives. And with sustainability, we work with a number of suppliers. We already have agreements with a number of suppliers to really ensure that we source responsibly.
You know, there's often a comparison made between you and Starbucks, as in, you know, will Joe and the Juice do for juices what Starbucks did for coffee, and really create sort of a lifestyle or a culture around it?
What I really like when we sit here and talk, and we're not only talking about a product, but we talk about the lifestyle. We want to be part of your lives, and we want to be much more than the product. We have great respect for Joe and the Juice. The founder of Joe and the Juice had aspirations to Starbucks when he started 20 years ago. We had our birthday last year.
Oh, wow.
So been around, but we do believe that we are what Starbucks was in the 90s. So watch out.
Good note to leave it on. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you.
Great. All right.
Please welcome to the stage Hussein Sajwani, chairman of Damac Properties, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Manus Cranny.
Thank you very much. Hussein, welcome to Doha. Welcome to the forum. Now, we caught up with Elon Musk yesterday, and apparently at Twitter you have to be an exceptional employee to work from home. I don't know whether I fit the bill as exceptional at Bloomberg, but I don't think I can do my show from home every day. Tell our audience, how is the world going to change? In your view, you build homes. What are you building for the future? Are we all going to work in this quasi work from home environment? Is it going to build or bust? Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you very much. Thanks for inviting me. Assalamu alaikum. Yes, the COVID has made a number of changes in a certain way of travel, certain way of operating, and certain way of living. In my humble view, the biggest change has been the video conferencing, the Zoom. I mean, amount of people now using that facility and traveling less or meeting face-to-face less and being happy with the Zoom is a huge number. Hence, I think my theory says a lot of business hotels around the world will struggle because the occupancy will drop. So a businessman is traveling, let's say, 8 times, he may travel 4 times.
But I've just come back from New York and I've just come back from London, and one message was very clear. Government, get these people back into the city of London, back into downtown New York. You want to see Hudson's Yard.
No,
people don't come back.
No. I didn't say about working in the office going to be at home. I said travel and the business hotels. From the working in the office, I think there is a lot of push from employees, with all respect, to work from home, but there is a lot of pushback from the management, the CEOs, and the government that they want people to come to the office and work. There is no substitute of working in the offices. Yes, certain qualities, certain type of functions like IT, like certain, an analyst in the bank maybe can do some work from home, but I think majority of people has to go back to work in the offices. This is my view.
So the employers will win whatever.
This battle between capitalism, socialism, employee, employer is a lifetime, Everybody come from a different side of the table.
We have just done some analysis today, Bloomberg Economics. We looked at 19 OECD cities. Price to rent, home price to income is the highest since 2008. You lived through 2008. I cried through 2008 in every margin call. So what is different now? Are we facing anything like the potential for a housing bubble as we did in 2008, globally, first of all?
No, I don't think so. I don't think we're quite far away from 2008. I have attended last month, or beginning of the month, in Davos. I met a lot of decision makers and a lot of people understand better than me economics. I was in a conference in Germany, Berlin, for private equity. I was, met about more than 35 top fund managers around the world. The consensus are they're going to be a recession. It's going to be mild in U.S. It's going to come out of it quickly. Their economy is strong. They're not getting affected by the war directly. Yes, interest rate increase and inflation. The bad news is in Europe, and the worst news in Europe, nobody knows where it's going to go. Is Russia going to stop the gas or reduce the supply drastically during the winter for whatever reasons? That could be a disaster. So Europe is a lot of unknowns in Europe now.
So a lot more risk in Europe, and if in the event that Europe slows down more materially than the United States of America, are you ready to acquire more businesses and do more deals in Europe?
Yes, that's one of the main reasons I was in Berlin, and I met a number of large property developers and large property asset owners and the banks. We're looking particularly at Germany and some of the Eastern European countries. If some assets or values come down, they already have come down, so we're doing a lot of homework and studying.
Commercial or private residential? What's your lean in Europe?
I am open for a value for my money, So I'm not restricted to any particular. I understand both sectors to a certain extent, so wherever I find value for the money.
So then let's just hone in a little bit on our own market, back home in Dubai and here in the GCC. To Dubai, prime up 60%. I've asked you this recently, but I just want to know whether you've shifted on your opinion at all. Are we at anywhere near a peak or a crescendo in the Dubai prime property market?
I'll give you an example. Just half an hour ago, I was meeting a friend from Africa, and he has a house in Dubai, and he costed him $50 million. Somebody offered him 150. And he's fighting with his wife and kids, should we stay or move out? And he says, crazy, you know, I just bought it 18 months ago during COVID, or 2 years ago. The problem in Dubai is, today Dubai is compared with London, Hong Kong, take Moscow, Beijing, whatever city. It's still in Dubai, the most expensive house in Palm is 7,000 dirham square feet, which is $1,500. In London, leave the most expensive, in the high end is 6,000 pounds. In Moscow, I was in Moscow last November. At the time was $4,000 square feet. You know, Hong Kong is similar. New York, $3,000 to $6,000. So when people comparing, the people who are coming to Dubai, and ask a number of them, one guy paid 150 million dirham for a piece of land next to Bulgaria. He paid 4,000 and a change square feet, empty land. He said, Hussein, it's $1,000, $1,100. In London, I won't get nothing for $1,100. So those newcomers are telling, and honestly, somebody like me becoming a disadvantage. My kids tell me, Dad, you're thinking of this land worth yesterday 100, today worth 150, is expensive. The guy came outside thinking the same price of Moscow and London is fraction of the price.
So they're rebasing the price back to Monaco as well and back to Zurich. I mean,
Exactly.
it's about benchmarking it to where
Dubai,
one can domicile.
It's a global city by all means. Attract global money. It has a lot of advantages which some of the global cities don't have, from safety, security. I mean, sorry, you can't walk today in London with an expensive watch. You know that.
Do you think we're at the beginning of a much bigger flow of money into the region?
I think a lot of money going to flow into Dubai, particularly Dubai, okay? In the region, I think the GCC going to benefit from oil and gas prices being up. Political situation is much more today friendly and stable among the countries of GCC compared to 5 years ago. So a lot of tension has come down. I hope the little bit left between Iran and America can get sorted out. Then we'll have a big boom in the GCC. And wise policies, very low debts, and higher oil prices.
So JCPOA deal and Iran nuclear deal could be pivotal for more flows of money into our region, across the region?
Definitely, if Iran and the US agree that the last tension is go away, a lot of people are going to think of this region in a more progressive way.
Okay, we've got a lot to get through, so let's square them away. The housing market for the next 5 years in Saudi, Qatar, and the UAE. What's your view? What's your outlook? Explosive growth, moderate growth? Give us the trajectory. Is it a Nike wish?
I mean, Qatar has done fabulous. First time I arrived here, 84, and I've been doing business here for 37 years now. I mean, it was a small village. And globally, when I look at globally, I think Dubai has done fantastic, Singapore has done very well, and Qatar has done very well. Those three cities, if you look at them 30 years ago, where they were, okay, Singapore a bit older than that, and where they become today, they've done a fabulous job. Qatar still has growth. You know, gas prices have tripled, if not quadrupled, so they're going to benefit. They're doing more projects. There will be more demand, more housing, more, you know. Some of the shopping malls. I was yesterday in a shopping mall here.
You had time to go shopping. He had a mountain of
I
meetings
went at
yesterday. He didn't have time to shop.
9:45 after dinner. I went there at 9:30 for a coffee. This mall called Hazm, go there. Amazing mall, honestly.
I'm not going to apply for PA with you. Look, I want to square away two other question from the audience, and make this one quick because I have another one on TCOM. What's the current status on the Burj Dubai in Doha?
I don't know. I have no idea.
Okay, that answers a question from the audience. No more tough ones, please. Right, TCOM. We've got a raft of IPOs in the UAE. TCOM is coming. This is the moment. A, are you all in on TCOM? Because this is the litmus test. It's a whole swathe of business complexes, Internet City, Dubai, Media City. How hot is this IPO going to be? And are you all in on it? Have you got a bid in?
See, let me tell you, Dubai government strategy, I think, is very good by taking government companies like DIWA, Salik, TCOM public. That will create more transparency, more liquidity to the market. TCOM is not a technology company. TCOM is a property company. They own a lot of lands, they own a lot of properties, they have rent income, and they're going to give you the price at around 6.5% a year.
6.5%. But come on, Hussein. I mean, people have been burnt before, and that's what I want to know. the same global investors, will they come and pick up TCOM?
I am not an investment banker.
But mind you, a few of those are making a few dollars off the ticket. Right, let's square away a few other things. You and I caught up recently on your most recent luxury purchase. Now, I want you to make this audience understand, what does the metaverse mean to a CEO like you? How do you engage with it and make it a part of your business?
It's something which is really, in reality, something we're going to see it growing and developing, where Facebook CEO, owner, whatever, changing his company name is a reality of life. Where it's going to take us, I don't know. How far it's going to take us, I don't know. All I know, as a CEO of Denmark Property, I said, this is the field, we cannot miss it out, you know? So we get to be in it. Honestly, how it's going to evolve, I don't think anybody knows, especially somebody like me. I mean, maybe Facebook CEO knows much more than me, definitely 100%.
Maybe you can tell me when you meet with Cheryl the next time. Give me a vision of where DMAC is. I mean, you've got the luxury business, you've got tradition of that, but where do you go next? It's the data centers. Just give the audience a vision of what you want to do biggest and boldest next. Hussein.
Today we are a global company. We have projects in Miami, Toronto, London. We're going to Copenhagen. We're looking at Germany, and we are in Middle East. We are in residential high-end. We're going into resort. We're doing a resort in Maldives. We're going to do more of that. We're doing data center. We have already one in in Riyadh, Dammam, Istanbul, and we're going to grow more of that. And we're going to the logistics. So we're going to go in all the aspects of the property: resorts, luxury end, logistics, data center, offices, and so forth.
I'm available for the media trip to the Maldives. I don't know whether Bloomberg will let me go. Hussein Serjwani, thank you very much. Engaging conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, Excellencies.
Africa has been hit hard by the pandemic, vaccine inequity, the impact of climate change, and various socio-economic ills. Yet, Africa's 1.2 billion people are charting new paths toward prosperity and inclusivity. Has Africa's moment arrived? I'd like you to offer a very warm welcome, please, to the stage, Monica Geingob, the First Lady of the Republic of Namibia. Madam First Lady, so lovely to see you, and thank you for being with us.
Thanks, Zain. It's such a pleasure to be here.
You know, the word resilience is resonating big today across the globe. How does that word hit for you as an African leader who's seen the continent through a myriad of crises, and how does it resonate going forward?
I think for me as an African, resilience is all we've ever known. And the personification of resilience to me is the poor rural African woman. So globally, everybody has to be resilient, but in an unequal world, some need to be more resilient than others. And I think Africans define resilience.
And how have you observed over, say, the last year or two in Namibia and in the rest of the continent that resilience has been handled? How has it been managed by leaders and successfully navigated the continent through these crises?
So the continent being as complex as it is, it's meant different things for different places in the continent. But certainly for Namibia, what we've seen was a historical divide between the private and the public sector, narrow somewhat, where you saw the private sector stepping in a little bit more to collaborate and work with government in resolving a lot of the crises, the multiple crises that were occasioned by COVID. So to me, that enhanced resilience, where you start seeing different sectors of society starting to work together quite well.
Optimistic, neutral, or pessimistic, how is it looking for Africa from your point of view in 2022 and say 6 to 12 months ahead?
So I've always defined myself as an optimist, and I always get irritated with the idea of pessimism. But I think the last 2 years has brought out pessimistic thoughts in all of us. So I think for me, it's optimism with a much more grounded understanding of concerns that we need to address quite urgently.
Like?
So obviously, inflation, food security, a youth population that's getting restless. We need to start paying attention to the mild coup fever that we've picked up that's resulting in democratic reversals.
Right.
And also really looking at our political systems, whether our political systems are reacting to the moment that we find ourselves in.
What do you think can be done better or differently to build back?
A couple of things. But let me start on how do you build back and who is in charge of building back. So how we do it better, and it's really about thinking about government, because government is there to solve our most complex problems. And many governments have a talent problem. And we need to plug this talent problem in government so that we have our best brains solving our most complex problems. Political systems have proven themselves not to be great at giving us our best, but our civil service, our technocrats, should represent our best. And I think that's part of where we can get a good foundation of building back better.
And we hear frequently how money and funding is being held back by investors recently who were very enthusiastic about Africa only 6 to 12 months ago. That was the story. What is your view on that? I mean, is that a smart strategy to kind of pull back, wait and see? Since you're an optimist, you're going to say no. But what are your thoughts on what we actually see happening on the continent in that regard?
So what I'm seeing on the continent is you've got policymakers who are a little bit more, humble isn't the right word, but a little bit more realistic about the type of policies that will facilitate investment. You've got valuations that are more realistic. You've got a need for external capital. So now is the right time to pile in when you're actually wanted and where you can sit around in a room and craft how you're going to build back better. So now is the right time.
And what sectors do you think would you prioritize, say, for example, in Namibia or in the region?
So certainly services, logistics, sustainable tourism, clean energy. So those to me are very clear sectors where there's massive opportunities on the continent and in Namibia.
What are some of the challenges that we see in the global south, for instance? There's a dichotomy, between choices that you have to make on the one hand for that are production oriented, that that serve populations, but then also have a damaging impact on climate. For example. So there's this balance that has to be handled in countries, for example, like ours. I'm from Kenya. So there is that dichotomy faced with people that live on the continent. So how would you address that going forward?
So the dichotomy is multiple. You've got the dichotomy, for instance, of many countries, including Namibia, being post-conflict societies.
Right.
Where, to an extent, we haven't prioritized things like mental health, which we regard as soft issues, but which cause significant socioeconomic problems, which we need to address in a more focused manner. But then the dichotomy that you speak about in relation to climate change, again, Namibia is a great example, because we've got fresh oil discoveries, but at the same time, we're pushing green hydrogen quite aggressively. And that, to me, really clarifies the dichotomy you speak of, because it is a transition and there will be an element of fossil fuels that remains required as we transition into cleaner energy, and Namibia really is at the forefront of that.
And you have a very strong background in finance, private equity, and I'd like to ask you, how does Africa restructure debt and its finance issues today that are quite significant and are posing multiple challenges across the board for many African nations? Could you talk to us a little bit about that and what you think the priorities are or should be?
So the rising debt burden of many African countries, again, it's different. You've got countries like Namibia, where we've seen a ballooning of debt, but it still remains manageable. But we're very concerned, for instance, about our debt servicing costs. So obviously something needs to happen there. How to restructure debt, Zain, I think there's only a few ways that you can restructure debt. But the essence of this restructuring is negotiating. So firstly, and obviously, we may need to look at negotiating better debt agreements. But even to restructure repayment terms to reduce this rising cost of servicing debt, whether it's improved public financial management, whether it's stopping illicit flows.
Right.
What is at the core of that? It's people. So we need to strengthen our negotiating teams who go and negotiate restructuring of debt, who go and negotiating debt agreements in the first place. And really what I was saying in the beginning of strengthening the technocratic capability in many of our governments, because a lot of our foundational problems comes from problematically negotiated agreements. So in a way, to me, it's not about the restructuring of debt, it's about the talent at the table that speaks to the restructuring and negotiates deals on behalf of government.
You've said problematic negotiation a couple of times now. So what are some of the core issues or missteps then that occur in your view in that moment?
So I'm married to a President Zain, and I want to remain married after this session. So I'm not going to say that. But I certainly do believe that there are debt agreements, and I'm not talking about Namibia, my husband, that could have been better negotiated. And I think that may be the solution for some of these debts, because debts that were political in nature, with no commercial underpin, are very difficult to manage. So I think there must be political solutions to that. And I think maybe also speaking as a continent in one voice on very specific debt crises that certain African countries face. Like, we must all agree that sanctions on Zimbabwe must be lifted. We must all agree that something drastic has to happen in Zambia around their debt structure, the same with Mozambique. Because some countries' situations are different to others, but we all agree with the principle that there must be a willingness to help some of these countries renegotiate and restructure their debt.
When investors think of Africa, there's the perception, and then there's the reality, right? How would you explain that to us today? How do you think that we should understand the reality of doing business in Africa on the ground today?
So the perception has always lagged behind the reality, and I think we as Africans have an obligation to drive a new narrative, be realistic about the challenges we face, because to me, the opportunities are bigger than the challenges, and the challenges are real. So we have an obligation to reshape that narrative and make it clear that what happens in one part of the continent does not impact a different part of the continent. And that when you see many talented Africans on stages like this, they are not an exception. It is a continent full of talent. And to exceptionalize what you perceive to be talented and kind of make a basket case of everybody else is not correct. And then what's important for me is we must find a way to humanize ourselves as Africans, because often, and we see, for instance, we've got a lot of people who work in different countries, domestic workers who come to different areas of the world to seek employment. And they're not always treated in a humane way, because I think there's a dehumanization of Africans that we need to resolve and ensure that our people are treated well outside, but we also rehumanize ourselves on our own continent and treat our own people at home, so that we stop seeing the manifestations of what happens to a people who've been historically dehumanized, and where others feel comfortable treating you as if you don't exist or you're not a person.
And one final thought for our audience here in the room and also watching online. If there was one thing that you would like to share about the continent today that we've not talked about what would it be?
What would it be? We've talked about young people and their immense potential, but we haven't talked enough about their political capability and how we're transitioning, how we're managing succession, and how we're looking forward to a younger crop of leaders who think about things differently and who can manage 21st century problems with 21st century mindsets.
I don't think we got you in trouble with your husband here. Did we, Excellency? We're good. All right. Monica Geingob, thank you so much. First Lady of Namibia. Really appreciate your insight.
Thank you.
Please welcome to the stage Vimal Shah, Chairman of BidGo Africa, Mohammed Dewji, CEO and President of METL Group, and Mo Abudu, CEO of Ebony Life Group, for a conversation with Bloomberg's Jennifer Zabasaja.
Thank you all for being here, Mo, Mohammed, and Vimal. We have been talking about this a lot, and I think when you think about this question of unlocking the potential of the next generation, we can take it in a few different ways, but I wanted to start with the question itself. Where do you start with this unlocking of the potential? Because the youth is there. We know the youth is there. Mohammed, where do you start, in your opinion?
So we all know that we have a big population in Africa, I think 1.2 billion. But what I want people to understand that the GDP for Africa is 2.4 trillion. So you're talking about $2,000 plus or minus per capita. Now, if you were to take out the countries like Morocco and Algeria and Egypt out of the place and South Africa, you're talking about per capita income in sub-Saharan Africa of $1,200 to $1,500 purchasing power. Now, with current commodity prices that have gone up, if you look at edible oils with sunflower problems, rapeseed problems, palm oil problems, prices have doubled, tripled. Then fuel prices have gone up, freight has gone up, logistically it's become a nightmare. You need more working capital to hold on goods. Grain problems from Ukraine, wheat replacement values have jumped up from $300 to $500. Now you're talking to people that have per capita income of $1,200 or $1,500, you're talking about $100 a month. And when prices of commodities increase and then you have taxes on top of that, what happens, it squeezes the Africans. And out of that $100 that they use, 65% they use in day-to-day consumption. And basically, they just cannot afford to buy food. So where I feel we need to disrupt, because we have big areas in terms of land and arable land, that we need to disrupt by bringing in high seedlings, bring capital to the youth, that they should not migrate to urban centers. And if you see in Africa, majority of millionaires, so-called dollar millionaires, are not in urban centers. They're in rural areas who are focusing on agri. So I believe the youth and the disruption has to come in the agri sector so that we can empower these youth, so that we can become the food basket of the world.
Vimal, do you agree with that?
I think I'd look at it from a different angle. We can actually see the youth as a potential problem, time bomb, or we can see it as an opportunity. It depends on where you want to look at it from. I think we've got education. We've got people now with digital awareness. I think our youth are far more capable now because they've got devices on their hands. And when they go to a classroom or they go to university, they're actually judging the lecturers based on what they do, fact-checking online. So I think there's a lot of potential. The question is, how do we harness this potential and really make it happen? I think the aspiration of a youth in New York or in Nairobi or in Tanzania or I'm sure in Nigeria is the same. So there's nothing different in terms of where their aspirations are. So if you launch an Apple phone in New York, you want it in Nairobi tomorrow. Therefore, if I look at it from an angle, it's a level playing field with the internet. Now, with that and technology coming in, I think what we need is to get our education system up to date. We need our leaders to listen to our youth, and really, they've got buzzing ideas. Government's already up to their necks in terms of employment, so you're not going to get employment by government or traditional routes. And I think this is where we've got to give them a listening, we've got to look at it from a different angle. And again, private sector, government, everybody's got to listen to it differently. And really, I think Africa's got the youth power that we can empower with the whole world and really get them there. But let's change our education system, let's change our systems, including banks, and I think we can talk about that, where they need to really change faster, because access to capital is a big issue for youth. And then youth with a really budding idea can't get access to capital. So there's a lot of issues around trust, and I think that's where we need to really build a bridge around the elder generation and, of course, the youth and the politicians.
So where do you start with that bridge, Mo? Because the disconnect is there.
The disconnect is certainly there, but I would rather take a different view from the views that both Vimal and Mohammed have taken, in that I look at the fact that our youth are our biggest resource. We have the youngest population in the world. That is a resource for me. I also know that as Africans, particularly as Nigerians, I know how resilient we are. It doesn't matter what the challenges are that are before us, we always find a way to overcome those challenges. Now, during the COVID era of the last 2 years, many people felt that Africa would literally just disappear, right? Many famous people actually said it, that we're going to be dropping dead on the streets of Lagos and other parts of Africa. But that didn't quite happen. I'm not saying that we have all the best leaders in the world, but I am saying that despite the challenges we face, we seem to find a way to get through those challenges. Now, if I take myself as a living example of what's going on in the continent, I am a black woman. I had a career in oil and gas until I was 40. When I turned 40, I decided that I wanted to change my career and get into the world of media because I knew how powerful media was in changing the narrative. When I got into this industry, I defined what's called the 4Ds, and that is literally how the world has seen us. And when I say the world, the Western world: disease, disaster, despair, and destruction. And that is all they see. Just Google images of Africa and see what comes up. And in order for that image to change, we have to be speaking to ourselves and saying to ourselves, what is the change that we want to see? What is the change that we want to be? Now, everybody goes to America thinking the streets of New York and LA are paved with gold, but we all know that's not the situation. But the media is such a powerful tool that we need to use to change perceptions, to change mindsets, and also as an educational tool. So for me, it's about, I've decided to play in a space that is media. We also have the Ebony Life Creative Academy that is training the next set of filmmakers. I have seen the incredible things that's happening in the world of show business. We have artists like Davido and Burna Boy selling out O2 arenas. They're empowering generations to come. Now, they have done all of this despite the challenges that we face on the continent. We've seen companies like Paystack and Flutterwave who have had huge amounts of investment in their companies from companies in America. So I'm saying that, I'm not saying that we aren't challenged, but our youth are so resourceful that I just know that given half a chance, they are doing and they will continue to do. And yes, we do need to continue to support them, but it's not all gloom. It's not all gloom.
But in order to get... I think that's a great point that you bring up, but just as Vimal was saying, it is different if you are sitting in New York City versus if you are sitting in Lagos and you have a phone. So there still
But they do have phones.
They do. I mean, in both cities, you're different. I mean, there are different challenges that children in the States are facing.
Absolutely, there are different challenges. I mean, we know what the challenges in New York is, or what the challenges in America are. I mean, you're literally leaving your front door. You're not sure if you're going to make it home on time. Now, do we face those challenges in Africa? No, we don't. We don't have people going around with gun violence. So we need to. I keep saying to myself that we are challenged, but don't let's focus on the negatives. Let's build on the positives, because that's the only way that we're going to get through all of this. We are a continent that is blessed by God with the best resources in the world that God has given to us. Value add we must do. We can't just keep shipping everything out.
Yeah.
So there are things that we need to address and that we need to look at as a continent. And leadership is key.
Yeah.
And we talk about the fact that many of our leaders are old, but many of the leaders around the world are old. You know, so what do we say about that?
Yeah.
So, I mean...
Well, what role do you guys see leaders playing? Because in order to give, I mean, what you were saying, Mo, building on the tools that are there already, what is it that leadership needs to be doing right now, and the messages that need to be communicated to the youth?
They need to lead. They need to lead, and it's like running an
What
organization.
does that mean, though? Vimal, do you want to jump in?
Team build.
I think leadership means looking at them and saying the potential. Because I think looking at them as a problem is a problem itself. And I think that's where we need to get leadership into everything. I think healthcare, edtech, agtech is what Mohammed was talking about. I think there's serious potential in everything. If you look at all the issues that affect us in Africa, and we always say it's a basket case or whatever, it is not. It is absolutely not. And I think that's where the whole opportunity lies, to say, give access to capital, get ideas flowing, and really entrepreneurship. I think there's going to be a lot of that. The leaders need to be able to listen. And I think this is something that's important for everybody, to listen to the youth and say, fine, what do you want to do differently? And I think there's a difference in values. As a 60-year-old and a 23-year-old, there'll be a difference in the way they look at things, the way they see things. We need to understand that. And our leaders need to understand exactly what the aspirations are, what they want to do, and then make it happen, connect the dots.
You said facilitator, not implementer.
So this is another problem. There's another point. Government should never be an implementer, because governments are never built for implementation. There should be facilitators to allow the platform, allow the change to happen. And then we've got to go into paradigm busting, because the paradigms are like, we've done it 30 years ago, 50 years ago, and today it's different. So today the freedom fighters are not fighting for freedom from colonialists. They're fighting for freedom from the old paradigms. And that's where we really need to give them oxygen.
I think also, together with good leadership, I think the private sector has a great role to play. So one of my initiatives is in impact investing. And if you see, for example, industries that create large employments, agri, or let's say the textile industry, and everybody complains that Africa has a lot of cotton, but we just gin cotton and we export. So I have taken that challenge up, and I have done the value addition. So I am ginning, I'm spinning, I'm weaving, processing, mercerizing, dyeing, knitting, printing. And I'm accessing the AGOA market. Now with that, they're not great returns, but I'm competitive. But most importantly, I'm giving a lot of employment. And I think with youth comes a big problem of employment. So one, there is the job factor. But two, there's the entrepreneurship factor. And coming to Vimal's point in terms of access of capital, so I have a Mo Dewji Foundation, and I've signed the Giving Pledge. It's an initiative by Bill Gates and Warren Buffett, pretty much pledging half of our money for philanthropy. And one of the areas, talking about education, we give grants to hundreds and hundreds, and we want to get to the thousands, because a lot of kids are intelligent, are smart, but cannot access good education because of non-availability of finance or loans. There are loan boards in government, but the problem is they're fully utilized. So private sector needs to play a part in terms to be able to kind of help and grease the system. So we give pretty much like grants to kids to go to university, but now we have the more entrepreneurs, where what we do is we give interest-free loans, and they come in and they pitch ideas, and because they don't have collateral, and because if they go to the banks and the interest rates are really, really high and takes forever for them to access capital. So we as private sector, I think, have a key role to play in accommodating our youth to prosper.
But you were mentioning that the returns are not great. And so how do you motivate other business leaders outside of the three of you to invest in this if it's hurting their bottom line?
Well, I think leadership has to look at the fact that they have a responsibility to do more than just returns on investment. I think that we have the youngest demographic in Africa. Most of them are allowed to vote. I mean, we have elections coming up in Nigeria now, and everybody and their mother is saying to our youth, go and register. Because we have to at some point take responsibility for the leadership that we have. And if you don't have the life that you want, the only way to change that is to vote to ensure that you do get the leaders that you want. Now, we can say that Africa rigs, but if we have a population that we know the youth are more than the on-youth, and everybody registers, it's going to be extremely difficult to rig. So therefore, we need to ensure, we as leaders need to ensure that our youth are registered and ready to vote. Because that is really the starting block. We need to educate them on what it means about voting, on what it means about leadership. And then those that we put into power, we need to start holding them accountable. Because I find that sometimes we just don't. It's convenient for some businesses in Africa just to turn a blind eye, look the other way, get on with their business, because they don't want to upset the status quo. You know, my business is fine, I've got good relationships with the government, and that's really about it. But we do need to do a little bit more in that regard.
That's the majority, though, right?
Well, it needs to happen. We need to start speaking up about the fact that we do need to have the right leaders. And then our leaders, please, for those that are listening, just select the right teams. It's like running an organization. I mean, look at us all here today. This wouldn't have happened if Bloomberg hadn't said, you know, in partnership with, Qatar, we want to make this happen, and this is the look and feel that we want. And the same has to apply to our government. You've got to have the right teams, the right people with the right qualifications, doing the right jobs that are going to lead us into the future that we so demand and that is so needed.
Mohammed, jump in.
I like her thought process.
That's it.
So my background, I've also been a member of parliament, and I was an elected member of parliament, not appointed. And I have a live example, like Tanzania. I mean, you look at Tanzania, and we're talking about natural resources. One of the resources we have is tourism. You have the Serengeti. My brother here is from Kenya, and they have marketed themselves far better than Tanzania. And you see the migration happening from the Serengeti into the Masai Mara, but the Masai Mara is only 5% of the Serengeti. But yet there are more tourists that go to Kenya than they go to Tanzania. It's again about leadership and approach. You look at Sharm el-Sheikh, or you look at Marrakesh, they've got 12, 14 million tourists a year. And then you look at the Serengeti. So we have Serengeti, you have the Ngorongoro crater. You go into the crater, you see the Big Five, you have Kilimanjaro, you have Zanzibar, and yet you have 1.2 million tourists a year. Yeah. So obviously there's a problem of leadership. Now we have a new president. She's a woman, very, very vibrant. She's doing a fantastic job. She's moving around the whole world, so-called the royal tour, and we can already see the impact in terms of huge influx of tourists, bringing foreign exchange. A lot of more investment is coming into the country, and I think she's doing a fantastic job, and I think Tanzania is ready to fly with new, better leadership.
We need to change the narrative. We need to change the narrative. It's really about changing the narrative.
I think we need a reset. We need a rethink and a reset here. Because there is a leader inside every one of us. And I think there's a leader inside every one of the youth. We just got to arouse them and give them the responsibility. The minute you give them responsibility, that's what we're starting now in Kenya for the elections, is wajibu wangu, which means take responsibility for electing your leaders.
Yes.
And really stop blaming somebody else. I think this whole blame game of let's blame it on Russia, Putin, COVID, or whatever, we've got to go back to say, hang on, our youth are capable. In the local areas, they can do a lot more. Give them leadership, give them responsibility, and they can do much more. Tourism, you talk about tourism, you talk about ag tech, you talk about drones. We've got youth who are looking at drones and stuff like that, and our governments come in and say, restrict that, don't allow this because of security or whatever. And again, some rules that are old. So I think this is where a reset and rethink required for all our youth to say, let them play with technology. I think Africa has got a lot of youth who can, very tech savvy, they can leapfrog to the latest, right? Yeah. And this is where we stop them as regulators, as even central banks. I'm sorry to say this, but central banks do not know how the banking industry needs to go. Fintech today is a disruptor, what Mohammed talked about. The disruptor is not being allowed because we think, we've got banks, we've got a disruption, the banking system will be gone. Kenya invented M-Pesa. M-Pesa is one SMS and your money is transferred. Why not give it to the world and make it easy? So I think this is where the whole reset, rethink needs to go back to everybody who's listening probably as leaders. Now, that leader inside everyone, if it's aroused, I can tell you one thing. We can say there's serious potential. We can be providers, and Africa can be a provider of the best brains to the world. I mean, our pyramids are still this way. The bottom is much bigger in the youth bulge. But I think the other places where we see in Europe and elsewhere, you've got that going the other way around. So we can supply that. And again, when you say work from home, work from anywhere, work from device, I think a lot of work, outsourcing, stuff like that, can be done from Africa, and we have the brains. So I just think that it's about leadership, saying, let's take leadership in terms of allowing them to do it, and really give them the norms, the curbs on the road, and say, fine, this is what your norms are. Make it happen. And I think this is where it's up to every leader to say, let me create more and more followers, and really, I think we can reset the world.
What about the international community? What is the role that international governments play in helping with this reset that you're talking about? Because yes, you can empower the youth, but if you're not giving them the global stage.
We have allowed the international community to come into our societies and literally take everything away from us.
So you put the blame on
Well,
yourself?
you see, again, it's about the leaders that we have. It's like it's about the leadership saying, what role do we play in this? I really am very passionate about value add. If we don't value add and we just send everything totally out, what part of that are we getting back? We're getting it back and paying 10 times the price for it that we can't even afford in the first place. So we have to look within. We have the resources. They actually need us more than we actually need them. And we need to wake up and realize that. We have the biggest deposits of everything in the world. But we have just let that just, sort of fade away, and it's taken away, and we've signed all these agreements for years and years. We've got all this debt, that somehow no one even understands where it all began or what it is. But that is where we are. So we have to, at some point, wake up and say, we have the largest resources of cocoa. Cobalt. Every single phone has cobalt in it. Where is the largest deposits in the world? In the Congo Republic. Where is the largest deposits of oil and gas? We have that. Diamonds and oil. I mean, what are we saying? We have it. So why don't we start holding them hostage a little bit more and demanding more from them?
It goes back to trust. It goes back to trust. I was talking to somebody in Wall Street and says, if you need $1 billion for a project in the US or for a US entity, it's easy. If you want it for Africa, it'll take us 2 years to look at the trust. And I think that's where the thing is, right? A lot of foreigners come out and do things in Africa. Why aren't the local people doing it? Because they don't have a problem of capital formation. That's our biggest problem. A lot of our leaders form their capital and is sent off to, safe havens elsewhere. Why can't we do that for Africa? So I think this is where we've got to get together and say, fine, let's show some credibility, let's show some action on the ground, and really lead from the front.
So the issue, she's fantastically on point, and I'm in agreement with her, because all these businesses that like cocoa beans vis-a-vis, what is the price of cocoa beans vis-a-vis what's the price of chocolate? What's the price of lint cotton vis-a-vis the clothing, etc., etc. So the value addition is tremendous. And I also agree with what Vimal says. The resources are there, the problem is capital. Today, if you want to go in and extractive resources, you need tons and tons of money and expertise. So I'm sure we can.
But we need to make the agreements more.
For sure.
They need to be fairer in terms of what those agreements look like. It's not that they get 80% and we get 20%.
For sure.
That's what's been happening, and that has to stop.
We got to stand up to it. I think we got to stand up to it. It happened to us in Kenya, in Uganda. We did the first oil palm plantation. All the world told us it can't be done. We've done it today. It's really working.
Yeah.
And really, it was meant to be supposing, in West Africa or in Malaysia, Indonesia. We've done it. I think it's not difficult, but our people got to go into the full value addition from end to end and really make that happen. Whether it's cocoa, whether it's cotton, whether it's palm oil, whatever it is, 60% of the unused arable land, if it's in Africa, that's a McKinsey report, right? If they're off, it's going to be 50%. But that's unused arable land. What are we doing with it? Food security for the world. Africa can produce it. Where are we doing? What are we doing about it? That's leadership. That's where the youth can really play a big role.
Absolutely.
And using tech, using the resources, I think is absolutely possible for Africa to grow up and become the supplier.
And really, we don't have any time, so I want this to be yes or no. A lot of times we've talked about this Africa being the potential. It's always been the potential. Do you all feel like this moment is different than
if I could just give you an example.
Really quick.
I'm in the media industry, right? I have partnerships all around the world with different media companies. We launched a series, by the way, please all watch. It's called Blood Sisters on Netflix. And in the first week of launch, it did 11 million hours. This show was written in Africa, produced in Africa, it's on a global network, and it did 11 million hours, competing with shows that cost 10 times more made in other parts of the world. So it tells you that we can travel. So that's in my, that's in my sphere. Right. And we all have to do the same thing in whatever areas we're working in, making sure it can travel.
One sentence. The runway can't be too long. It's about time Africa takes off now.
I think we've been potential since independence, and I think we could remain potential for another 50 years unless we take some action and get things going. I think that's important. Action.
Right. Hopefully I don't get in trouble for that, but I think that was a good way to end. I thank you so much for joining us, and thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for that really dynamic panel. I'm so glad that you enjoyed it. You had Uganda, you had Nigeria, and a few other African countries represented there on the panel. Thank you so much for that, everyone. That concludes our morning sessions. We invite you to join us for our general networking lunch at the Al Wassail foyer. Please be back here at 1:45 for our afternoon programming that will be on the business of sport. So we'll see you then. Thanks.
Every day, Qatar Airways carries some 7,000 tons of cargo around the world.
The more we fill it, the more money we make.
But the aviation industry is facing severe challenges. Among them, its impact on climate change.
We have a vision to be net zero as early as possible